Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Along with the fourth, fifth, and sixth, seventh rounds that are happening today in the NFL draft, continue your football-related consumption here when it comes to your favorite show, of course, your favorite weekend podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast here to tell you how we kind of didn't have that great of a mock draft. But no, we're not here to talk about that, really. We're here to talk about what was actually a pretty wild week in the NFL for all circumstances here, boys. And that's what we are here to talk about today here on the show. Introducing, as always, Iceman Jerry, joined by my compatriots of chaos, my favorite duo of destruction that joins me on a weekly basis. My man, wearing a very nice Jets jersey. He said I know he said this jersey. He's had this jersey so many times on the show, but I want to say this might be the first time he's wearing it on the show, or maybe second time. I could be wrong memory-wise.
Second time.
Second time? All right, so second time he's wearing the jersey on the show. Justin here on top with me. Justin, how we doing?
Pretty bad, man. The Jets just making moves.
Making moves indeed.
Oh.
Making moves indeed. Not only with the first round pick, not only the draft. The Jets traded for a guy. I don't know if people have heard of him. His last name's Rodgers. He plays quarterback. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But the Jets have indeed had a very productive week, some would say, very newsworthy week that helped really kick things off before the NFL draft. So there's that. And of course, joining us at the bottom there with his Cole Kmet, beautiful Chicago Bears jersey. It is the great podfather, Rick. Rick, how are we doing?
Did we plan on wearing the same number 85 jerseys, Justin? Because that's kind of what's happening here.
Planned on it, but
I mean, I don't know if I planned on it either. But obviously, we're here doing that. Yeah. Listen, the Bears made some interesting moves in the draft too, as most of you now know. If you're joining us for the first time, I am now a pre-christened Bears fan. I'm a born-again Bears fan, if you will. So, this is where we are. So it's gonna be fun. And yes, the rounds are still going on, and I do have something to say about the Bears' most recent draft pick, but I'll wait a little bit because I have a little bit of a. I'm going to add that to my rant actually at the very end because I have a very interesting little tidbit I want to talk about with that. But get ready for that.
Yes, as Rick foreshadows, we always end. For those of you that are joining us for the first time that are going to be new to the program, and for those of you that are returning that have seen this dog and pony show many a times, or at one point dog and reindeer show here on the show, we end things off with a rant podium from Rick himself that honestly I would argue is probably the best part of the show on a weekly basis, consistently, especially what was the end of last year around the Christmas holiday season. That was a fun time to say the very least. And Justin claimed that we had peaked at that point. I would argue, Justin, we've kind of done a decent job since then. So the show's only getting better, boys.
I don't disagree.
But anyways, let's move on with things. For those of you, again, new to the program, we have a tagline on the show that I sometimes forget to say at the end, but semantics. Fun, football, chaos. And the way that we always like to start out the show is we have a little bit of fun that, interludes with the football aspect. So with the fun, football, chaos, let's start with the fun. And let's start with, for I think the first time in season 2 in its own proper segment, if I'm not mistaken, we have Rick's mind-blowing fact. So Rick, you've been ducking this for a while here. What's the mind-blowing fact?
I'm going to ruin a nursery rhyme here for you, boys. I'm not sure if you've ever heard about this.
Thanks for ruining my childhood.
You're very welcome. So this is something that I found out rather recently. It was based upon an academic discovery based upon little English medieval history. So the nursery rhyme Humpty Dumpty. Everyone knows Humpty Dumpty as an anthropomorphic leg, or egg rather, with legs and arms. And, he was sitting on a wall and then he had a great fall and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. But obviously he couldn't be an egg. So the real question is, what actually was Humpty Dumpty? And there's two different camps about this. There's one camp that believes that it's a tongue-in-cheek reference to King Richard III because he was a rotund figure, a little bit fatter. But there's actually a little more of a historical aspect to this. See, back in the year 1648, in the siege of the town of Colchester, England, the town had a great castle and several churches that were encircled by a protective wall. Humpty Dumpty was a large cannon that was protecting the city and was placed atop St. Mary's as the walled church to defend the city. Well, the enemy hit the church tower, making Humpty Dumpty the cannon fall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. So there you go. Humpty Dumpty was not actually a big egg or a fat man, but a very heavy, very large cannon. You're welcome for having your childhood ruined by a Bears fan.
I mean, that actually didn't bug me that much.
No, I mean, it's more for our younger audience who might actually still hear that nursery rhyme. I don't even know if parents today tell kids nursery rhymes anymore. I think that's kind of, if it doesn't rhyme with TikTok or Twitter or Tumblr, they're not going to really talk about any of that anymore. So, I think that's kind of gone by the wayside, if you will. So
this is something to really explore in the offseason when we're going to be slow as hell in NFL content, aka when we can't talk about the draft too much longer next week. We got to have an episode where we honestly just revisit our child, because all three of us are relatively around the same age, and so we probably grew up hearing the same nursery rhymes, like the sky is falling, Humpty Dumpty, like fantasies, fairy tales, folk tales, folklore, all that stuff. We got to have an episode where we just review all that stuff and like look for the hidden meanings.
I'm sensing a Harry Potter Trivia Part 2 is also in the offing.
I mean, that was always going to happen. You already know Justin's going to take time off during the summer, and we're going to have our fun then.
And when I take off, you guys will actually do a Pokemon contest or whatever it is you guys are planning on doing. We've been waiting for that for a while now, guys. TikTok
game tier list. First off,
yes.
And second off, Justin has to give the 1,000% okay with it, and he didn't give it 1,000% okay last time. So
1,004 holds of Justin Zuckman Zucktails. Got it. Okay.
Exactly.
Arm bar.
Justin's like, why are you pinning this on me? I had to do it, Justin. I had to do it to you.
I did it.
Yeah.
Me, this guy here.
But in all seriousness, quite the fact there. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, in case you couldn't tell, sometimes the fact, sometimes the rant podium, sometimes the stuff we do, it just ain't going to relate to football all the time. But hey, like I said, the chaos isn't the name for a reason. If we called ourselves just sports agents, well, none of us are getting an agency license anytime soon. And I don't think none of us would have been able to represent Lamar or Jalen Hurts, because they would have actually, one of them goes with competent people and the other one just, relied on himself. But to each his own.
But you can show us the money. I mean, we'll gladly take the money. That's totally fine.
Too bad they wouldn't show us the money in that case anyway. Anyway, moving on. The games do not end there because, mind-blowing fact of the week is honestly a perfect addition to the show. We do have our typical set of games by our games master here on the show. Justin, he's perfect with it. And we got one of each this week when it comes to trivia, fact or fiction, some would you rather. So let's start with the usual opener of the program when it comes to the games, some trivia.
All right, guys. Can you tell me who the active leader in interception return touchdowns is?
Interception return touchdowns.
Yes. Pick sixes.
Wow. Okay.
This is a beautiful call. This is a beautiful callback to last episode where I was about to start answering corners, and Justin's like, no, I mean quarterbacks.
Yeah, last week the question was league leader in interceptions.
But that was not interceptions thrown for a touchdown. So that's another.
Well, it was an offensive thing. It was quarterbacks who have thrown interceptions.
Yeah, and this is corners who have, or safeties, or defensive linemen.
Could be a linebacker.
Or Matthew Slater.
I'm willing to bet that it's not Matthew Slater nor a defensive lineman. I'm kind of willing to bet that.
Yeah, I mean,
gunner on special teams.
Yes, all about those gunners on special teams.
Yeah, but it's not. Who is the defensive player currently active with the most interception return touchdowns?
Okay.
So then, okay. So the thing that I'm trying to think about is who's been in the league for a very long time that's played in the secondary.
Well, also who recently in the last couple of years have had massive big interception seasons, and how many of those interceptions did they return? Because remember, Rick, not this past season, but it was more so the year before it, Trevon Diggs was off to a hot start where he had like an interception in like 6 straight games for the Cowboys.
Right.
Not this season, the season before. And I want to say it maybe at least one, if not 2 of those were returned for touchdowns. So he's in consideration. Xavier Howard has had 2 really good seasons over the last couple years, which got him his big contract and then his renegotiation on his big contract. Like there are a couple guys to consider here. If there's one thing I could say, like for this stat, whoever you think your top 3-4 corners in the game of football are, you eliminate them, because maybe those guys get some interceptions, but the telltale numbers with a lot of the number 1 corners now is pass percentage against them, touchdowns to interception ratio thrown against them. Like, I mean, people argue he's not at the peak of his powers anymore, but I still think he's got a little bit of time left. But Jalen Ramsey, Jair Alexander, Sauce Gardner, those kinds of guys, like they don't rack up the interception numbers, but they do shut down half the field.
Right, and guys that rack up the interception numbers, like you were saying, don't normally return them for pick sixes. I mean, like Devin McCourty probably is up there, but he's not really an INT return guy for touchdowns.
Yeah.
I would say.
Well, didn't he retire as well? So
He
I
might
think
have. He might have. Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu is another possibility. Honestly, I'm thinking of a guy already, and I'm going to run his name by you and see what you think. Marcus Peters.
You know what? That's a good one because very early in his career, he was known for that.
Yeah, because the other guy I was thinking was Patrick Peterson, but a lot of his returns are more kick returns than they are interception returns. He was a great shutdown corner, but for some reason, until the ball was kicked to him, he couldn't return it for a touchdown.
Yeah, very true. Like it was a big deal. Like after his second or third season, when he got his career high in interceptions, he just never reachieved that interception mark.
And I feel like wherever Marcus Peters has gone, he's been not only a ball hawk, but he's been a guy who's been able to jump a route and return it for at least some yardage, if not a touchdown.
Yeah, that's a really good first guess. When my guess was honestly going to be, like I said, I mentioned Trevon Diggs because I want to say Trevon Diggs did have like that really good season 2 years ago, but also J.C. Jackson, Rick. The season before he hit free agency, I specifically remember a game where I'm pretty sure he had 2 pick sixes, and combine that, like just the 2 pick sixes alone, I think gets you somewhat in the conversation.
What I want to know though is because I agree with you, but what I want to know is how many guys are tied with 2.
That's a good question.
I feel like you've seen it twice, but very few guys get beyond pick sixes in their career.
Yeah,
I think Marcus Peters has. So I'm gonna stamp that as my first guess. Marcus Peters is my first guess, Justin.
I think that's a great first guess.
That is a very good first guess, but no, Marcus Peters is not on my list of active people with interception return touchdowns.
Really?
Well, I mean, he could have one. It's a long list, but
no, he definitely has to have a few.
I don't see him in the double digits. So,
we're talking double digits. What
for a career?
Active players
with interception return touchdowns.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Okay, this definitely throws the right.
We can double check it if you'd like. Source is not.
Wow.
Marcus.
This definitely threw me off now.
That's interesting. That is so interesting. Because why wouldn't
I feel? I don't know. It feels weird. I feel like if you just YouTube Marcus Peters pick 6 compilation, something would pop up.
The video would be at least more than 10 minutes. If that.
Well, because they got to have 50 different replay angles.
Right.
I say this as someone who has experience going through NFL highlights. They put
Yeah.
God. Okay. Wow. This changes the math for me in terms of now who I'm trying to think of.
Yeah.
All right, Rick. How many corners and safeties have been in the league for at least a decade off the top of our heads now? I think that's what we got to think of.
Well, the only other guy that I could think of that might be an answer, but I don't know if he's still active or not. But now that if you're saying double digits.
Okay, so I'm going to recuse the list that I have been using because Marcus Peters is currently second.
Thank you.
Active pick 6.
Thank you.
He has 6.
There you go.
So then the only other guy that I could think of is Janoris Jenkins. But
right.
I don't know if he's still active.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't know if he is.
I want to say he retired. He did have a run. People forget he had a run.
I thought he did. And he also changed his name to Jackrabbit, so I don't know. Maybe he's coming back under the new persona of Jackrabbit Jenkins.
Wait, did he really change his first name? I thought it was just his nickname.
I think he legally changed it to Jackrabbit Jenkins.
Good God, another chosen Anderson. Jesus Christ.
Or Ocho Cinco.
Well, I mean, at least he had the stats to do it.
Or Meta World Peace.
All right, he definitely didn't.
No.
When you are when you start Malice at the Palace, I don't know if we could put the word world peace anywhere near you.
Is he? He has to still be in. He might not be on a team, but he's got to be an active free agent, though.
If he's an active free agent, he's been an active free agent for a while. I have not heard the name Janoris Jenkins in an NFL broadcast in, I want to say, 2 years.
Jeez. Who else could it be, though?
Is Richard Sherman an active free agent?
No, Richard Sherman is not active.
Nah, dang it.
Not at all. Okay, but he didn't officially retire though. So technically speaking, he's still active. It's a technicality, but he's technically still an active player in the NFL.
It is a technicality. And he was technically signed last year to an NFL franchise, the San Francisco 49ers. I'm gonna recuse this question. One, because the website was that I was using was very but two, because technically the answer is Janoris Jenkins, but
Wow.
he is not retired. He was a practice squad player last year.
Look at that.
And
Who was he a practice squad player for?
San Francisco 49ers.
Oh, okay.
They could have used him in the NFC Championship game probably.
Do you guys want to take a crack at the all-time interceptions for touchdown leader?
Rod Woodson.
Ed Reed.
Correct. Rod Woodson. Yeah, at 12.
I thought the first list Justin was looking at was by accident the all time, and he just, Justin's looking at the list and he didn't somehow notice.
Was absolute trash.
I thought it was like who was the active leader in the 90s. I was like, how is Marcus Peters not on this list?
I was hoping just for jokes that like somehow Justin didn't notice that. I was hoping that somehow Justin didn't notice some of the older names on there because he would have just flown right by Dick the Night Train Lane on there.
One of the best.
One of the best nicknames of all time.
And that also is a record that will never be broken because I think he's got like maybe 40 plus interceptions in his career. No one's ever going to do that.
Yeah, especially in today's game, these quarterbacks are so hyper efficient.
I mean, if you're a quarterback and you're playing Ryan Tannehill 16 games out of a season, maybe you'll get 40 interceptions. You never know.
Well, unfortunately,
Night Train Lane has 68 interceptions in his career.
Even better.
It's not the all-time leader, and we can do that in another week if you guys like.
Oh, your teaser.
Yeah.
You cheeky. You know what I'm going to say.
I used to know the answer to this question because I played Madden so much when I was a kid, but honestly, I couldn't even tell you off memory anymore who
Technically,
the number.
he is fourth, but again, we'll move on. Let's go to the next game.
Yeah, that's definitely more than fair to say, at least. So we can't say we got stumped, and we can't say we got it either. So it's actually we kind of can.
It's a wash. Much like the weather outside, it's a wash.
Much like the Detroit Lions' first round draft picks this year. Anyways, moving on.
Let's go. Jack Campbell.
That you're one person. Okay, let's go to some NFL Would You Rather here, Justin. Let's have some Would You Rather here.
All right. It's gonna be a more of a who would you rather? What would you rather your team do? Guys, who did you support more day one? The Houston Texans trading up to draft Will Anderson, or the Cardinals trading back and then trading back up for Paris Johnson Jr.? Which one was the better move and why?
So remind me again, Arizona only made one pick in the first round, right?
Arizona only made one pick in the first round. They traded back. They got they traded for the 12th pick and a first round next year. Houston's first round next year, by the way, not Cleveland's. Right. And they got a second this year and I believe a third next year.
Yeah.
But then they traded the second they had this year plus the 12 to move back up to 6 and take Paris Johnson Jr.
And they traded that with the Lions.
Correct.
Okay. I mean,
that must be for the quarterback too.
I'll start this off. I think what Houston I so hate to give Nick Caserio credit for something, so I'll give it to D'Amico Ryans instead as the coach. I think Houston made the much more shrewd move in the draft because I think they got the two guys. It's funny, they got the two guys that I think everybody was saying in their mocks they were going to get. I'll tell you what, that trade up to 3 was one of the gutsiest trades up to 3 I've ever seen a team do. And I think it's only like the third time that a team has had 2 picks in the top 5 in the last 20, 25 years, something like that, from what I remember.
And the other one's the Browns.
And the Commanders / Redskins in 2000, I think, had that too. I think you got the quarterback that you wanted because you got the quarterback who I think is, other than Bryce Young, is the most pro-ready quarterback now to go out there and start day one. And you got an absolute ball hawk who can turn the ball over without without any kind of idea. You basically, as I said when we drafted him, you got J.J. Watt on your team 2.0 because Will Anderson has that ability to be a run disruptor, a pass stopper, a gap rusher. He's got all the tools necessary. I know he's a little bit on the smaller side, but he's got all the ability. And there's nobody that I would say, if you tell me you're a freshman and you win SEC Defensive Player of the Year, you're a talented player. You really are. So I like what Houston did. I don't dislike what Arizona did, but I think the better move was what Houston did because they also had the capital to make that move work. I don't think any other team could pull that move off because Houston had enough capital and enough of a mindset and know-how that, look, they might still be bad next year, but they're at least going to be electric with both Stroud and Anderson there. So I think Houston made the better move.
So I don't necessarily disagree, but for argument's sake and playing devil's advocate, which I very much do like to do, as I like to sometimes
or Purgatory's representative, as you call it.
Well, I think I say advisor, but very, very
close enough.
Purgatory special counsel to the tribal chief. Anyways,
yes.
I do agree with Rick. Like, to me, when you get two of the top 5 players in a prospective draft class, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. And it was very bold for the Texans to do that. To end up getting Will Anderson and CJ Stroud. They get their young franchise quarterback to build around, and then they also get the key defensive piece for themselves. So I can't really go against that in terms of massive criticism. What I will say, though, is that I did like the chess game that the Cardinals did there because I don't know how that they were able to get the Texans first-round pick next year when I thought it was going to be the Browns pick, logically speaking. But you got to give credit where credit's due. You trade down to get that extra compensation for next year, and then you trade back up, only giving up the extra second this year. Now, yes, you could argue, well, losing that second you still got an extra first and third next year. And for next year, where, again, as of now, it's just a 2-quarterback draft, Cardinals aren't necessarily a team that need a quarterback if Kyler is still the guy of the future. If Kyler really is still the guy of the future, then, or even if he isn't, you have your franchise left tackle for the foreseeable future in Paris Johnson Jr. Like, he was the best pure tackle coming out of this draft because Peter Skoronski was good, but Skoronski, almost everyone kind of mutually agrees that he is probably better suited to move to the guard spot once in the NFL. So you got the best pure tackle in this draft class. You trade up to get him because he wasn't going to be available at number 2, or at number 12, excuse me. It was available at 2, but Texans weren't taking him. You do that, you get the extra picks next year. Now you have 2 first-round picks in what could be a very intriguing draft class where you can maneuver things around a little bit. You get 2 players next season on good value contracts that could make impacts right away because let's be real here. If the Cardinals are going to not have Kyler for the first half of the season, and maybe even more, who knows how long the injury is going to keep him out, they're not going to be a good team. So they're already going to have their own high pick. And the Houston Texans, look, I think so far they've had a really good draft. I don't think they're going to be as bad as they were this season, but I don't have them making that foreseeable jump the way that, let's say, the Jaguars did from 2 years ago and then last year to this past season. Like, I don't think they're going to have that. I would love if they would do better than the Tennessee Titans. That would be phenomenal. But, dreamers can't be choosers. So I think the Texans are still going to have a relatively good first-round pick. And if you're the Cardinals now with the potential ammunition of 2 picks in the top, let me be nice to the Texans here, top 11 range. Yeah, 2 top 11 picks next year. That's a lot for you to play around with, especially because maybe if at the end of the day, let's say they fall out of love with Kyler, you now have the ammunition to trade up and get one of the top 2 quarterbacks next season because maybe by chance a team that doesn't need a QB gets the number 1 pick overall again next season like we had this year with the Bears. Obviously, it's hard to say right now, but I also can't fault the team for giving themselves more draft capital to work with in the future. And now you have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds for next season. That's very good. That's a lot of talented young players to add. That's a lot of talented valued contracts to add. I give the Texans credit, but that was still a pretty heady play by the Cardinals. I did like that move. And they drafted up for a for sure pick is the big thing. They drafted up for offensive linemen. If you're talking about a safe pick to make, offensive lineman is the definition of making a safe pick. with Paris Johnson Jr. there.
I mean, I don't want to throw this out there, but ask the Jets how safe Mekhi Becton was. You know,
You can't base draft based on who you think might get hurt. It's not like Becton had a history of injury.
well,
Same
true,
thing with Paris Johnson.
true, but
If you have a player that's got a clear history of injury and there's a nagging injury that keeps coming back, and you draft him in the first round, then sure, it's not a safe pick.
right. I mean, I guess to throw another
At that
name out
point,
there.
no pick is really safe.
Also, you want to talk about like tackles, New York teams drafting tackles that stayed healthy, Rick. The Giants got two of them in Evan Neal, Andrew Thomas. They've both been pretty healthy and pretty good, especially Andrew Thomas.
That's also after the Eric Flowers debacle. So, you know, it doesn't always work is, I guess, my point here, you know?
I mean, Eric Flowers, I just don't think he played well in New York. I don't know if injuries were the problem. I just don't think he should have been drafted as high. But that's a talent evaluation misstep.
Right. Of course.
I don't think that's the case here. I think Paris
the
Johnson
only
is
safe
miles
pick
better
is
than what
kicker.
Eric
That's
Flowers
the only
was.
safe pick.
Well, I agree, especially, you know, when two kickers get drafted before a quarterback some people had mocked in the first round, kicker's really safe.
You know, and it just hurt me that Arizona took Clayton Tune, of all people. Tanner McKee's right there, Arizona. Come on.
I mean, I will say this. There are some teams that actually do need like a backup quarterback that I'm very, very surprised that aren't going with quarterback right now. It's a shock to say the very least.
Yeah, well, you know.
So there's that. All right. Great game of Would You Rather right there, Justin, as always. But we do have one more for the beautiful people. This podcast, these games, this show is for the people, by the people, for the people, for the enjoyment of the people, and for football people. All right. So let's continue. Let's continue things here now with our last of our games, NFL Fact or Fiction.
All right. The Philadelphia Bulldogs, if you will, have had the best draft so far this year.
Ooh.
For those of you who don't know, Philadelphia has had what a lot of people are calling the best draft by a long shot, taking almost all Georgia Bulldogs. They started out with Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith in the first round. They did take Alabama tackle Tyler Steen and Illinois safety Sidney Brown, and then traded a third-round pick to move up in the fourth round to take Keely Ringo, cornerback out of Georgia as well. That is a potential fifth starter that could be on the Philadelphia Eagles next year from Georgia. So, guys,
all they needed to complete the infinity gauntlet of Georgia players was drafting Stetson Bennett to be backup quarterback. That's all they needed.
I mean, at this point, you've got to imagine Kirby Smart has a paying role on their team as a scout advisor, right? Basically, I mean, let's be real here. Have they had the best overall draft? It's very hard to argue against it. It really is. I mean, the only team that I would potentially say, in my mind, might have had a better draft, possibly the Steelers have had as good a draft, if not better, because I think that it's really hard to know what Jalen Carter you're going to get. It really is. There's a reason why this guy was the number one overall prospect and then fell nearly out of the top 10 because of character issues and of a really bad pro day. So if you're Philadelphia, you're taking a gamble on a guy who's rated as number one, but in reality, you don't necessarily know if he's going to be the number one player that he was before the last couple months have been. That being said, I think absolutely they've had the best draft. I just wonder, and I worry about a little bit of some durability issues. I know Nolan Smith fell a bit because he had, I think, a leg injury or a knee injury of some kind. And so you got to wonder a little bit. Maybe that was like a Nakobe Dean incident where he fell too because of an injury. Tyler Steen going in the third round for them was a bit of a question mark because, yes, he's a talented Alabama tackle, but he was not rated as high as the pick was made out to be. And then I think Keely Ringo's a steal. So I think that, yes, based upon ratings, they've had the best draft so far, but you've got to see how it plays out in training camp, and you've got to hope that all these guys come in to camp in the best shape that they've been in. That way you can truly start to craft a Georgia-esque defense and recruit UGA 15 to be your Mike linebacker, and have a little white bulldog out there just chasing the quarterback around, because who wouldn't love to see that on the football field? So, yeah, I do. Like I said, I think Pittsburgh's draft was excellent. The first couple picks they made were really, really good. But I think overall, you're probably going to say Philadelphia. As much as New York fans hate to hear it, Philadelphia will probably be the winner of this draft going forward.
Yeah, it's hard to argue. Like there are some teams here that have made some really good selections, I think. I mean, we just did talk about a team that had the second and third overall pick respectively here with the Houston Texans that I think you're going to have to consider. But obviously the big thing will be based off of how C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson both end up playing. I mean, they didn't just double down. They didn't just triple down. They quintuple down. They were going to centuple down, or whatever the proper terminology might be, if they could have. And I'm trying to make a joke here by going on my best available here and seeing who else is left that has a Georgia logo next to their name. Because if there's anyone in this draft class that has a Georgia logo next to their name, I'm willing to say they're probably going to end up being drafted by the Eagles here.
Maybe not, because the best available guy is a safety, and they just took Sidney Brown. So
there's always the 7th round, Rick.
That's true.
There's always the 7th round. So, I would say tentatively for now, it would be the Eagles, because the upside of these guys is so massive. But when you are talking about boom and bust, and it is a fair thing to bring up, like with Jalen Carter, I'm not as concerned with Jalen Carter about the off the field stuff, because I think now with Jordan Davis being there, with Nakobe Dean there, those are two of his teammates that he's won a national championship with. You have veterans still in that locker room, mainly on the defensive side of the football, that can make sure he gets his act together. Like, the organizational structure is in place for Jalen Carter to have success. I think it's on him if he can't put it together, because there is no excuse. Your teammates are there, literally, like both guys you just played with and guys you played with a year ago. Your teammates are there. There's a whole setup there. You got veterans there, Fletcher Cox, Brendan Graham on that defensive line you could learn from. So much talent is there for him to be able to just absorb naturally through osmosis. I would be very surprised. Like, if Jalen Carter, because there's always a combo of, why did this player fail? Did they fail because of themselves, or did they fail because the situation was not there? There's no excuse for Jalen Carter for the situation in this case. This is solely on him if he doesn't end up working out here. So, but aside from him, Keely Ringo, like, you get a cornerback in the 4th round, there's going to be zero pressure for him to play right away, considering they did retain both Slay and Bradbury. So again, he's going to learn from those guys. Nolan Smith, honestly, I feel like he's going to take the Nakobe Dean role of, again, no pressure on him to have to perform this specific season. Like, Nakobe Dean is going to step in and get more playing time. Whereas, Dean's going to come in and get the more playing time, whereas Nolan Smith can kind of take that step back and, again, learn and figure out in training camp and practice during the season, what is his role on the defense going to be? Is he going to be a little bit of a unicorn where they use him as an outside linebacker with which edge rushes pastime? Is he just a physical freak of nature, maybe, that out of nowhere, and he's going to be on the defensive line majority of the time? What is his role going to be? And that is the insurance that you get with having multiple 1st-round picks. So, like, if you're talking about boom potential, good God in heaven. Good God in heaven. The Eagles had a really good draft here, boys. So I would say for now, they do have the best draft. But I think this is certainly a question we could revisit. Maybe not today, but maybe a week or two from now, when we have like a more clear full 7-round draft choices. Who do teams have? But I think it's more than fair to say the Eagles have had the best draft so far.
I think the only thing you can say with the Eagles is that and we talked about it before we went on the air, is that they did make a trade and they did pick up a running back to replace Miles Sanders, which I think was the only real glaring need that I think they are lacking on the offensive side of the ball, because all their picks have been defensive for the most part in this draft, I believe. I don't believe they made an offensive pick at all. And maybe that's because they're feeling like they don't need to really do that sort of thing. So I don't know. I think there's a possibility that maybe the Eagles, if they're so defensive heavy, that might be your one critique and your one gripe, is that they're not exactly the didn't go offense at all in this draft.
Well, they may not have drafted offensively, Rick, but they did trade offensively for a running back here. And by the way, that player they traded for went to the University of Georgia. So
I'm telling you, Kirby Smart has to have a contract somewhere in the back channels to be their scouting advisor. He has to. He has to.
I mean, there's no rule saying a college head football or basketball coach can't have a second job.
You know, if Nick Sirianni doesn't work out this year, maybe Kirby Smart is going to be the next Philadelphia Eagles head coach because all his guys are there. So maybe.
They'd be the most seamless transition from college to pro ever.
It would be. And it would be just like Kirby Smart to do it better than Nick Saban did because that's just how he is.
Yeah, or that piece of trash human being Urban Meyer. It would only be right.
I thought we were going to get through one season without mentioning him on the podcast, but here we are again.
I take shots at anyone, Rick.
No, no.
I take shots at anyone. Frickin', did I not mention Jamarcus Russell a week or two ago? Like anyone can catch a stray here on this program.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
So let's be honest with ourselves. But yes, honestly, outstanding as always. Justin doing his job, and also watching the draft because Justin has like a 55-foot monitor there in the background, low key. That's probably
Let's take, man. I gotta watch.
I gotta know how you feeling about it.
He's got a jumbotron there as he watches the draft, and we're gonna get a live reaction here. So
it's a little behind, I think. So I know who the Jets took in this round already.
Yeah,
so
he's still waiting. Yes,
I think he's just watching like highlights of like this guy playing in Pitt.
Yeah.
For those of you that aren't watching the draft and watching us, it was Israel Abanikanda, the running back from Pitt, that was taken in the 5th round.
Which, honest to God, I didn't say it to Justin. I was actually saying it to another one of my friends who's a Jets fan, that I felt the Jets needed to take a running back in this draft class because I just don't like Michael Carter as the second running back now. I've kind of fallen out of love with him. Well,
Dwayne McBride's still on the board, so we can give you a little salty about that potentially too. So
yeah. Calm down there, Tanner Rickey.
And why would they need another running back, Jerk? Who have the Jets gotten? Who have the Jets suddenly upgraded one of their big positions with in this past week that we've been away?
Well, I mean, it's a guy who I don't think is going to say no to a running back because at the end of the day, he needs weapons around him. Ladies and gentlemen, seamless transitions, as we call it in the biz. Good stuff there, Rick. The quarterback sagas of the offseason are finally over. Ladies and gentlemen, the New York Jets have their franchise quarterback. I'm already willing to call him the greatest quarterback to ever play for the Jets. He hasn't even played for the Jets yet. He hasn't even practiced for the team yet. Ladies and gentlemen, the New York Jets officially traded for Brett Favre 2.0, a.k.a. Aaron Rodgers. Now all Aaron Rodgers has to do is send a risque text to a Jets worker, go to the Minnesota Vikings for 2 years, end his career on getting concussed, and then wait for a couple of years, and then, may or may not allegedly in a court of law do certain things to a state in the union that's more towards the South. I would bet Arkansas. Anyways, Aaron Rodgers is officially a New York Jet. I'm sorry, Arkansas. I had to pick somebody.
Arkansas is getting some shellacking now. Okay.
Look, nothing against them, but
I didn't do anything wrong.
They will get some more towards the end of this episode, and I had that for you. So
I didn't even plan that. Look, nothing against Arkansas personally for me. It's just more so the fact that Aaron Rodgers has to pick a state down there in the South that he has to go after, and it's probably going to be Arkansas for I can't even tell you a reason. Anyways, let's actually move on with it. Aaron Rodgers, ladies and gentlemen, is a New York Jet, and Lamar Jackson has gotten his bag. He is signed with the Baltimore Ravens, but we are going to go in chronological order for this. So the news broke, I believe it was Monday, I want to say. It broke on, it literally broke on live TV. Like at one point, Adam Schefter was just like, stop talking. And like everyone was talking, he was just on his phone. And it was like, the Aaron Rodgers trade has been official. According to my sources, Adam Schefter gets the big scoop on live national television. Aaron Rodgers is a New York Jet. The package for Aaron Rodgers, predominantly the two most important things involved in it, three most important things, excuse me, a swap of the first round picks from the draft. So the Jets had 13, the Packers originally had 15. They swap spots. So the Jets just trade back 2 spots for him. The second round pick that the Jets had previously acquired in the Elijah Moore trade with the Cleveland Browns gets sent over to Green Bay, as we all kind of really expected. And then there's like a late round pick as well that was involved. I know the Jets got a late round pick back with Aaron Rodgers, which, let's be real here, the true value is that 5th round pick, I think. But next season, it's a conditional 2nd round pick on the condition of Rodgers must play at least 65% of the Jets' offensive snaps next season. and it'll become a first-round pick. So let's be real here. A first-round pick next year is most likely on its way to the Green Bay Packers eventually. But yes, Aaron Rodgers, finally, this saga is over. Finally, we know the future of him. We knew the future was never going to stay in Green Bay. We knew he was never going to be a Green Bay Packer past this offseason. It was going to be one of 2 or 3 things. It was either going to be Jets quarterback. It was either going to be retirement, which honestly, retirement's still kind of involved in the third thing here. He was retired and just done whatever and maybe grow ayahuasca in like some farm or something. I don't even know if he could grow it properly. I'm just spewing it out there. Or retired and also become the host of Jeopardy. So, there are options there. So for Rodgers. And I'll say this because I think the current host is Ken Jennings, right?
It's Ken Jennings or it's Blossom, Mayim Bialik, depending on the week in the tournament they're running.
I'll be real with you. Aaron Rodgers would do a better job than either of them. Anyways.
Ken Jennings won 73 games in a row. He deserves that mantle.
Don't care. Aaron Rodgers would have been better. Anyways.
Jesus.
Rodgers is his Jet, and he's also no longer wearing the number 12, so we cannot say AR12 for the man. He is wearing, Justin, what number is he wearing now?
8. Back to his college number.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. That's a nice little throwback. Now, the college number throwback is the only throwback to college that Aaron Rodgers will have. So no, ladies and gentlemen, he's not going to get in contact with his family ever again. But what he will do is be the face of this New York Jets team that, as he said, has won Lombardi trophy. And Lombardi is looking pretty lonely there, as he said in the opening press conference. But before we get to the reaction of these two fine gentlemen, one current Jets fan, one forever Jets fan, and one, Judas of a Jets fan, as some people would like to call him, as some people have called him. We do have some reactions to what happened with Aaron Rodgers, because as we know, someone here was, had a lot of thoughts about the whole Aaron Rodgers thing. So let's play a video for the good people here before we continue on in our analysis here, lads.
Sports Agents of Chaos, Season 2. Aaron Rodgers, Welcome to New York, Part 1. You know that episode of SpongeBob, the April Fool's one, where Squidward makes the really terrible prank on SpongeBob, and then the unnamed character says to him, "April Fool's, jerk"? Well, it feels like whoever created Peeps Pepsi is saying that exact same thing to me. April Fool's, jerk. The things I do because Aaron Rodgers has decided to come to New York. It's just great. So, back by popular demand, first subspressions, the debut episode of Season 2 is Peeps Pepsi. I don't even like Peeps that much. I mean, it's not the thing I reach for at Easter. Easter's not really the holiday that you go for it, but, I guess we have to do this and see how it is, and may God have mercy on our souls. I don't even know. Let me get the sniff. I mean, why? Why do I do this to myself? For your entertainment and your enjoyment. Aaron Rodgers, here's to you. Welcome to New York. You know why I don't like Peeps? It's an artificial marshmallow flavor, and that comes through in the Pepsi. This tastes almost like a flat diet Pepsi almost. It's just like, why is this a thing? Why? This is going to linger for the rest of the day. You know that, right? Well, there you go. Peeps Pepsi. I had no words.
That's what you get.
Did it linger for the rest of the day?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. And what's funny about that, too, is that I then read a news story that day that said consumption of marshmallow Peeps can cause cancer. So for Aaron Rodgers, I put my body on the line for him coming to New York. So
shouldn't they have called it Peepsy?
Hilarious. Thanks, Dad.
My girlfriend says it's not funny.
Thanks, Dad.
All right, let's get to the actual analysis. Justin, as the still Jets fan, as the loyal Jets fan, compared to the Judas on the bottom screen here, let's go with you. What were your thoughts about the Aaron Rodgers to Jets deal finally happening?
Listen, as a Bears fan, he should like it just as much as I do because, he's no longer there to torture you in Chicago. I love it. Look, it was the major glaring need that they had last year. You could say they had all these issues. The linebackers weren't great. They didn't have a run game after Breece Hall went down. The offensive line was in shambles, but their turnovers dried up. But all of these problems are something that is maskable and fixable with proper quarterback play. I mean, if they had any semblance of a quarterback last year, teams wouldn't have been able to stack the box, which means they would not have been able to completely shut down the run game in the second half of the year. They would not have had, they still might have had as many offensive line issues due to injury, but the offensive line would have had a better chance if they had someone that they thought maybe could throw the ball over the top, was a threat. They weren't going to constantly go 3 and out. And then I really think you would have seen an improved defense because all teams had to do on offense against the Jets last year was not make a mistake. And that's why the turnovers dried up in the second half of the year. They scored a lot of points with Breece Hall because they couldn't stop the run. The offensive line was playing okay. They were playing well. And Breece was running left and right and killing it for the Jets. And teams needed to score points. Now, in the second half of the year, when he tore his ACL, all they needed was to score a touchdown or two and play good defense. And not make mistakes on offense and not turn the ball over and not give the Jets the ball in good field position. And as good as that Jets defense played last year, the turnovers dried up. The yards started piling up. They got gassed towards the end of the year. And a Jets team who was in playoff contention the last 4 or 5 weeks of the year lost 6 straight and didn't make the playoffs. So even if you get the Aaron Rodgers that they had last year, which I don't think they will, because I think a lot of it had to do with his thumb injury and his lack of mobility because I think he was banged up. If they got 26 touchdowns and 3,000 yards, that was a playoff team last year. It was. And a lot of that roster has stayed the same. So the expectations should be high. I don't know if they should be the favorite to win the division because the Bills are still there. The Bills are still a very good team. I'll give it to them, even though I maintain still, I think that there's something a little off with that team. They're not necessarily a championship team in my mind. But yeah, what's not to like?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I was telling a friend of mine this yesterday. If you, and I'll take away extra points from the touchdowns as well, just to keep it simple, because sometimes extra points are missed. Sometimes, teams go for 2, etc. Aaron Rodgers threw 11 more touchdowns than all the Jets quarterbacks combined last season. Yes, that includes Mike White, Joe Flacco, Zach Wilson, and whoever else. He threw 11 more touchdowns than them, and 2 less interceptions, mind you. But focus on the 11 touchdowns. 66 more points he scored than the Jets in a down year for him. In a down year after winning his 4th MVP in his career. But just focus on that. 66 more points. Why do I mention that? Because the last 5 games of the season that the Jets lost, their 5-game losing streak, they lost those 5 games by a combined total of like 50. You still had 2 touchdowns at least left over compared to what Rodgers did. So, at this point, if you don't like the trade, then you just do not like Aaron Rodgers on a personal level for whatever he's done to you to rub you the wrong way. Do I agree with the guy on an off-the-field basis? No, not really. I don't think me and Aaron Rodgers would necessarily be the best of friends off the field, but this isn't show friends. This is business. I'm not even pointing out Rick specifically. I know a lot of people personally that they made a lot of different comments about Aaron Rodgers. And look, at the end of the day, that's perfectly fine. You can say what you want about him as a person, but keep it on the field. He is the best quarterback. He's already the most talented quarterback to ever play for the New York Jets, and it's not even close. And he hasn't even played a game for them.
We'll see if he beat that Ryan Fitzpatrick season. That's the best Jets quarterback season offensively of all time. Ryan Fitzpatrick, everyone.
Yeah, well, he's got, I hope 2 years for it. Like I said, I made the joke with 1 year because of the whole Brett Favre thing. But in reality, let's assume maybe 2, maybe 3 years. But at the end of the day, the Jets needed a quarterback. I find it funny that the people who are always like, you're a quarterback away. A team is there's no such thing as a wide receiver away. There's no such thing as a running back away. There's no such thing as a defensive end away. There's no such thing as a kicker away, which there probably should be, but there's no such thing as that. It's always teams are quarterback away. And we always talk about how, well, if you're going to pay someone so much money, it's going to be the quarterback. If you're going to draft up someone so high up, it's going to be quarterback. If you're going to trade up to the number 1 overall pick, you're not trading up for a defensive lineman. You're not trading up for an offensive tackle, although I could maybe see that happening if it was like a really, 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 really good offensive tackle. But you don't trade up for that stuff. It's always trading up for the quarterback. And then suddenly it's Aaron Rodgers being traded for a package that I think is more than fair. Let's be real here. You kept your first-round pick this season. Yes, it sucks you didn't get the offensive lineman you wanted at the end of the day, but you still kept the first-round pick this season. It only cost you 2 spots. You gave up a second-round pick, but you got that second-round pick for a wide receiver that, I'm going to be real with you, I don't necessarily think he was worth a second-round pick fully, so you gave that up. And then a first-round pick next season. In all actuality, you gave up a first-round pick and 2 draft spots this year. Like, what is the loss here? What is the actual definitive loss?
In theory, the Packers had no choice.
Yeah.
They weren't going to get anything for Aaron Rodgers if he retired.
Not this season. Last season, so, I told my friend this. If
he goes to his agent and he says it's the Jets or I'm retiring, then the Packers don't really have a choice.
Exactly.
He's either going to retire and they let him go and then he signs with the Jets for whatever, and he still hits their cap because there's a bunch of dead money there. It's not like he's going to restructure. Or they trade him for whatever the Jets want. Now, obviously, I think the Jets were trying to make the compensation fair because it makes things easier. In theory, do I think they could have probably held out for a better package? Sure, but I think it was about time. Aaron Rodgers wanted to show up. Obviously, I mean, he was practicing on the practice field the next day with Alan Lazard. I think both teams kind of wanted to be done with it. The Packers wanted compensation for this year, and that's kind of what led to it getting done. So I think they probably could have gotten away with it without giving up a first round next year. I think they were worried about that, and that's probably what held it up. But yeah, I can't really be all that upset. I think that it was a good move.
Yeah, like I'm just saying, I just find it funny when the discourse that we always have about quarterbacks changes because people don't personally like someone. It's fascinating to me. Like you could personally not like a guy, but you need to kowtow and bow to the fact that this is one of the 10 best quarterbacks of all time, and now he's going to a team that's needed that.
You also have to hope he can return to form and play a little better than he did last year because he wasn't so great in some of the clutch games last year. I mean, I remember the Tennessee game; he was missing passes that were wide open. Again, I think that a lot of that has to do with his inability to grip the ball. He had a major thumb injury. Again, I don't remember what exactly it was. I think he had some lower body issues towards the end of the season. He was.
I think it was still his foot or ankle. No.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see what the Bears fan down there has to say. Rick, would you have traded for Aaron Rodgers or drafted Tanner McKee?
Well, the Packers did just draft their savior in Sean Clifford, so I mean, there's that. You got to think about that in that sense here. Okay, I'll take this twofold. First of all, I think you're absolutely right, Justin. I think the Jets would, with Aaron Rodgers last year, would absolutely have been a playoff team because you're right. They had a fine season with very incompetent quarterback play. Chris Trevler and Mike White aside. Looking at you, Joe Flacco. Go kick rocks. Anyways, the compensation, I think, at the very beginning was a big question mark because that's kind of, I think, what held up the whole deal from the onset was that the Packers, while they knew this was the end game, I think the Packers brass wanted to really consider what they could have gotten. And so the dependency here for a Jets fan comes down to 2 things. One, does Aaron Rodgers stay the second year? And in all seriousness, it seems like he will, barring a catastrophic injury or barring him breaking up with his girlfriend that lives in Massachusetts or Connecticut or whatever it is. So he's not close to her anymore. So there could be that. Because if you only have Aaron Rodgers for 1 year and he plays 65% plus of all the snaps and he doesn't come back in 2024, the Jets don't have a first-round pick they can use on a Caleb Williams or a Drake May, a quarterback. So that's the question that you have. And it's a question that we can kick down the road for another day. The second question that I think Jets fans have to look at is the deal was restructured in such a way that and I think I texted this to you guys in our group chat. Aaron Rodgers is getting $1.5 million. He's getting the minimum this year. But the way the contract is restructured, next year he's on the books for about $105 million or something like that, with a $58 million guaranteed bonus that will get paid no matter what happens. So does that hamstring you in certain ways? I understand that Garrett Wilson is young. I understand Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson, those are all first-year guys, so it won't hamper them in any way. But will that hurt you in free agency in 2024 if you want to go get more free agents of that mindset? I think those are things you have to kind of keep in the back of your head as thoughts. Because, yeah, if you look at the Aaron Rodgers deal on paper for what it means for the Jets right now, it does make them a contender. But let's pump the brakes, like Justin's saying, pump the brakes on Super Bowl contender, on division winner. They're a good team. They're going to be a good team this year. They're probably going to break their playoff drought. We saw the Kings do it. We'll probably have a light the beam ceremony in green like the Kings did with the Jets green. We'll probably do that. But it doesn't change the fact that in the AFC, you still have to run through Patrick Mahomes. You still have to run through Joe Burrow. You still have to run through Josh Allen, although that's a little bit fishy here and there because you're right. Buffalo's a bit of a question mark. So you still have to run through those guys potentially.
Well, let me say this. Technically, the only one for sure that we know that they have to run through right now is Josh Allen. Because as much as I'm sure Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes will be playing in the playoffs, there's only 3 teams that you play in the playoffs. And depending on your seeding and your matchups, you're not necessarily versing both of those guys.
Yeah.
Right.
They might knock each other out.
You might not see, you might not see either one. It's I mean, at this rate, especially for Patrick Mahomes, extremely unlikely considering he's made the last 5 AFC championship games.
But you will see Mahomes during the regular season this year.
Oh, do they play the Chiefs this year?
They do. They have the AFC West this year and the NFC East.
Whew, that's going to be good.
So you have Aaron Rodgers against Josh Allen, against Pat Mahomes, against Justin Herbert, against Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles, against the Dallas Cowboys, who are always going to be a nightmare, and then that Giants game, which the team that went to the playoffs last year is the team that is ticketed to go this year. So let me just switch over fields here. As a Bears fan, which I know is going to make everyone laugh, but as a Bears fan, the question that I have is, does this make the Bears now the number 3 team in the NFC North? Because Jordan Love is still there.
You'd shoot for number 1.
Well, you would, but yes, you would. But here's the thing.
He went from a team that didn't make the playoffs to a team that's not going to make the playoffs.
Right.
Did they move up one spot in their own division?
Well, because I mean, this does change the landscape of the division of the NFC North a little bit. Minnesota's fraudulent, but they're still going to be probably the favorites. And Detroit has gotten a lot better. So not having Aaron Rodgers there, we'll see if Jordan Love or Sean Clifford make Green Bay a better team. I think if you're a Bears fan, you got to love the fact that you now have Aaron Rodgers out of your division completely. I think every team in the North has to love that he's finally out of their division completely. Because he did own that division for X amount of years. I know Minnesota had a better year this year, but it still was Aaron Rodgers' division. We were all living in it. Now that he's gone as a Bears fan and Bears fandom, there's a better chance here to get those wins against Green Bay and kind of get back on the right side of that rivalry, if you will. But that being said, I do think this was a good move for the Jets. Like I said, in the onset, that compensation was a bit of a question mark, and now coming out of what his deal is going to be, that's a conversation to have down the road for the $108 million with the $58 million guarantee. Because I think that's a question you have to crunch the numbers on and make sure that you can still get your team or keep your team the way that you want to with that money on the books.
I love how I just realized that you changed your name to Podfather Rick in parentheses Judas.
I like it. I might go on back on Twitter and do it at Podfather Judas on Twitter. Maybe we'll see.
I like it.
Yeah,
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm with you guys. I mean, I will say, Rick, just the one thing when it comes to let's say hypothetically, Aaron Rodgers just does choose to retire next season. If you're going to be as good as you hope to be, you weren't getting one of those top quarterbacks that you would.
Oh no, this is an absolute selling of their soul for a Super Bowl title.
Yeah.
Absolutely is.
Love every second of it.
Absolutely, and as a Jets fan, you should.
Bad, then I don't want.
Well,
Brett Favre on the Jets, then I'm not happy. If we get first half Brett Favre on the Jets for the whole season.
Yeah, of course, and that's the thing too
until they lost.
Is that you won't know how it really turns out until week 1. Preseason's not going to matter. I doubt you'll see Aaron Rodgers play in the preseason at all.
No, you won't.
I doubt
No
it.
way.
I wouldn't even chance it.
Especially with him playing in OTAs, you're not taking the chance putting him on the field.
No.
He'll be loose. He'll be ready. He'll play in practice. He won't take a single hit the entire offseason.
Yep.
And then he'll play week 1.
Preseason is the Zach Wilson show.
So really, it does come down to week 1. So all this conjecture is great, and it makes for excellent talking points. But if you're a Jets fan, you are hightailing and getting in the time machine and speeding towards September to get to week 1 and see how it all plays out.
Yes, sir.
As you should be. As you should be. Absolutely.
Yeah. This is a real Jet season for people to be excited about, and it's going to be phenomenal. I must say, I really wish we could not get copyright strike. Maybe like this would be the time to not be on YouTube, because I'm just thinking of the meme where it's like the kid walks up to the camera and he just snaps his fingers and like whatever the background is, because Rick going from the Jets to the Bears, of like going from one team that finished last in their division last year to another team that finished last in their division, that like this is just beautiful.
Love it.
Rick
secretly loved Adam Rank is what it is. All that talk.
Whoa.
He was, you know how like they say people put on a big show just to prove they don't like something, even though it's like,
he texted me again, by the way.
Did he text you like Vince Russo like last time?
He texted me like Vince Russo. He's like, how about those D tackles, bro? We got 2 D tackles for the second and third round, bro. And I'm like, okay, it's the same pick. KK, bro. We'll see how we do.
I'm excited.
Put the Bears on a pole match.
I'm excited to see him have the Bears have double-digit wins again this year in his position.
Phenomenal.
I'll at least be realistic about my team. Not like Adam Rank. That's the one difference between me and Adam Rank. He's a homer. I'm a real fan.
The one difference.
I'm also better looking than he is. Okay, 2 differences. Fine.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly.
Yes.
All right. Before we move on here and all the Aaron Rodgers conjecture is out, like I said, Rick said in the video himself, that was part 1 of the Sipspressions. We have a number 2.
Okay.
So, I wonder what this one's going to be. Wonder if he's going to hate it or love it.
All right, Aaron Rodgers. Welcome to New York. This is part 2 of my punishment. I'm sure you saw part 1, which was the Peeps flavor Pepsi, which was just exquisite. And now we have Move by Coca-Cola, the limited edition transformation flavored Coca-Cola. I don't know what that means. What's going to be transforming in my mouth right now? Like what is it going to be? Coke and then it's going to become Sprite? Is it going to be, Coke and then become ginger ale or root beer? Or is it going to be like a different flavor? Like, what is transformation flavored Coca-Cola all about? All right, so let me do this. Let me take 2 sniffs and see if one sniff is different from another sniff. Here we go. Oh boy. Okay, first sniff's like cotton candy almost. Second sniff's like stale cotton candy. All right, well, stale marshmallow Peeps, meet your match in stale cotton candy Coca-Cola, I guess. Here we go. There's literally no flavor to this, like, at all. Oh, no, there it is. Oh, it's bubblegum-ish a little bit. See, I don't like original flavored bubblegum. I'd rather do, like, a cinnamon bubblegum or a fruity flavor. This original bubblegum doesn't really do it for me. If you're into, like, Hubba Bubba or the Bubble Yum, if you remember those, or the Bubble Rope, that too, you would like this. But this just doesn't really... It's not as bad as Peeps Pepsi, I will give it that much, but it doesn't really move the needle. Ironically, it's called Move. It doesn't move the needle any which way for me. So, big miss by you on this one, Coke. Sorry for you. And once again, welcome back, Aaron Rodgers.
Doesn't move the needle, but let's move. Get it? Ha.
Make fun of my joke with Peepsy.
Hey, listen. I'm allowed to. I'm a dog dad. I can make those jokes. You're emotionally unattached, so you can't make those jokes.
All right then. Moving on. Well, like I said, Like it says in the lower third there, ladies and gentlemen, multiple quarterback sagas ended this week. It wasn't just Aaron Rodgers being traded because lo and behold, we kind of actually called it on the show last week here, Justin, is that Jalen Hurts' contract was going to summon something finally with the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson to get going to a move. And boy, oh boy, did it summon something indeed, because, ladies and gentlemen, Lamar Jackson has finally signed his contract extension with the Baltimore Ravens. Finally, a deal has been reached. And it paid the man very handsomely, too. 5 years, $260 million, and total guarantees of $185 million. $5 million more on the total money than Jalen Hurts, and I think $5-6 million more on the guarantees. So overall, that's what it takes. And finally, Lamar Jackson is now, once again, officially a Baltimore Raven. God bless his soul for having to deal with John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta a little bit longer. But in all seriousness, he is now, once again, fully in the fold, and that obviously probably impacted what the Baltimore Ravens have done with their draft, specifically in the first round. But we're going to talk about more about the draft in a little bit. But boys, we spoke about it last week, and now it affected it. We always say quarterback contracts affect contracts in all sports effectively do their thing in terms of guys resetting the market. Market was reset with Jalen Hurts. And now Lamar Jackson just reset it well. And once again, Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow are very, very, very happy about this for their eventual contract negotiations here. Because I believe Joe Burrow's fifth-year option, if it didn't already get picked up, it's going to be picked up from news that I saw over the last week. So also tying into the fifth-year options we spoke about last week. So look at the NFL following our lead here, boys. But Rick, I'm going to start off with you. Lamar Jackson finally got paid, finally got his money, and he still did it without an agent. Now, he obviously didn't get the fully guarantees that he had originally set out for, that he originally wanted. But at the end of the day, I think it is official that the whole Deshaun Watson deal is a outlier that the NFL owners are very much not happy with the Haslam family about. But that aside, he did reset the market like he is supposed to do. He reset the market like all quarterbacks wanted him to do. And like I said, Herbert, Burrow are happy, and probably another year or two from now, Patrick Mahomes is going to be happy when his mega deal eventually gets refixed up as well and restructured, because Patrick Mahomes is still going to get he's going to get another deal or two for sure. That 10-year deal is like I said, Justin said it in text that I say, the salary cap is a social construct, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't really exist when you think about it. But Rick, enough filibustering. Lamar Jackson contract extension. Your thoughts?
I think it's also like what Hector Barbosa says in the first Pirates of the Caribbean. The salary cap is like a guideline instead of an actual rule. You know, that's like the Pirates code. Look, I think this is absolutely what needed to happen. I think that the Ravens were desperate to get Lamar Jackson signed to an extension. I think seeing Jalen Hurts signed to a non-100% guaranteed deal was the tipping point that Lamar kind of said, okay, yeah, Deshaun's contract is an outlier. Let's talk. And getting Odell Beckham was another case where it was like, let's talk. Because now it seems like the Ravens have Lamar's best interest in mind for that. What it does is twofold. One, it keeps Baltimore in that position of relevancy, because I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm going to make a comparison between the Jets and the Ravens because of their two great quarterbacks that they now have. You take Aaron Rodgers off the Jets, and you saw last year they were competent, but they weren't great. They weren't a good team that was a playoff team. You took Lamar Jackson off the Ravens, and Anthony Brown was a joke, and Tyler Huntley was a joke. They needed Lamar Jackson here. And you know what? It still doesn't really help that that's their quarterback room, because it doesn't solve anything other than, Lamar's paid, so he's going to be here for a few more years. But it definitely solved the riddle, because I think if the Ravens were unable to keep Lamar, then, yeah, they would be going hunting for a quarterback, because they're not going to win with Anthony Brown. So the answer here is Lamar Jackson got his money. He got his bag. He got what he needed to. The Ravens, I think, did a nice job of softening the blow by giving him a significant amount of it as guaranteed based upon the Jalen Hurts contract. And yeah, I think the Haslams are out of their minds for what they did with the Deshaun Watson deal. But if you're Baltimore, this is exactly what you needed. And it showed, like you said, based upon their first draft pick this year, that they are committed to getting Lamar Jackson weaponry and committed to being a player not only in the AFC North, but in the entirety of the AFC. Because again, you keep Lamar in the AFC, and now you look through that run of quarterbacks that you have in the AFC with Herbert, with Mahomes, with Jackson, with Burrow, with Tua, with Josh, with Rodgers, with Tannehill. Just kidding. There's a whole host of guys who are making the AFC an absolute gauntlet. Trevor Lawrence even, too, because we saw how good he was last year. So it keeps the Ravens competitive, which I think they needed to be. They needed to keep Lamar here. So I think it's the right call to make, and good for Baltimore on letting Lamar kind of realize it himself that I'm not going to get a fully guaranteed deal. So let me walk it back. How much can I get guaranteed to stay here and be happy in Baltimore? And Justin, as a Jets fan, I think, you probably wanted Lamar to go to the NFC because it's one less quarterback for you to deal with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was Justin's MVP pick going into last season.
It was. I remember that.
And I think if he would have stayed healthy, he might have had a shot. I mean, he started on fire. The first 2 games, I think he had like 7, 8 passing touchdowns and over 1,000 yards and like just the first 3 games. So look, I think that it is the best move that they have made. This is the first move that they made that I like this offseason. I mean, I don't hate Odell. I don't know if he's worth the amount of money that they gave him. It is something that they needed to get to make your quarterback happy. You're now $100 million quarterback happy. And look, I mean, he deserved it, man. He is the only quarterback that won an MVP that had to go through this kind of negotiation. And he's still, 26? It needed to happen. So I'm happy for him. I'm happy for his family and the Ravens. And now let's see if they can put it together. I did love their draft of Zay Flowers. I think that's an excellent move for him. They finally got another first-round wide receiver, which I thought was necessary. And let's see if they can, keep him healthy and put together a good offensive season because they struggled towards the end of last year.
He is 26, which is only a year older than Stetson Bennett.
And Hendon Hooker, too, is
And
also
Hendon
25.
Hooker.
Yeah.
So for Stetson Bennett and Hendon Hooker, while they're just going to be entering the league, Lamar Jackson has played, 5-6 seasons now, has made the playoffs, won an MVP, had a contract dispute, and then signed his contract all in that span of time.
See, kids, it's okay to dream because sometimes your dreams will come true. Unless your name's Stetson Bennett, then probably not.
Yeah. Or Will Levis, who was not drafted in the first round at all and did not attend night 2. Ladies and gentlemen, that is also a transition right there. We are just absolutely perfecting the transition game on this show. The 2023 NFL Draft and our reactions to it. Obviously, there's a lot to take in. We're not even really going to be able to talk about the current picks happening right now that are going to continue to happen up until the 7th round. Although, to be fair, is the 7th round pick really going to sway our decision on how a team's draft went? If the answer is
yes, if it's Tanner McKee.
Yes, or Tanner McKee, of course. Once again, 2 kickers drafted before him. Anyways, let's get down to the actual nuts and bolts of this thing. There's a lot to go over when it comes to the draft. We obviously spoke a little bit about it already. We just mentioned the Baltimore Ravens right here. We spoke about the Houston Texans a little bit, fellas. There's really only one way to go about it, and that's, of course, at least starting with the NFL the first round of the draft and observations that we can generally have. So let's start out with the quarterbacks at least. We already spoke a little bit about C.J. Stroud with the Houston Texans, but the Carolina Panthers end up going with Bryce Young with the first overall pick, and the Indianapolis Colts go with Anthony Richardson with the 4th overall pick. Now, obviously, Anthony Richardson, one of the 2 guys in this draft that is the intangible factor, is really what drove things home. It's his physical tools that he has. It's the fact that he could throw a football straight in the air and hit the ceiling of an arena, of a practice field. Cool, I guess. But in all seriousness, Anthony Richardson, with the physical tools he has, with the gifts, and with the fact that the Indianapolis Colts hiring the Eagles offensive coordinator, who was just recently working with a mobile quarterback, get a mobile quarterback here with, you could argue, maybe even a stronger arm than Jalen Hurts. At least if he could get the accuracy up, it'll be even more lethal, but to his own. And then you go with the Carolina Panthers here, going with who we spoke about this on the show a couple weeks back. Despite the fact that both Justin and I didn't necessarily think they were going to go with Bryce Young, we did all just have a general consensus that Bryce Young is the quarterback of this class. He wasn't necessarily he wasn't talked into this draft class with the same amount of hype this year that I think Trevor Lawrence was in his draft or Andrew Luck was in his draft, but Bryce Young was that for this draft class. He was definitively the most talented quarterback on the board. And sometimes we kind of said it 2 weeks ago, not the best player in the draft doesn't always go first overall. Sometimes, for the most part, it happens, especially when it's a generational talent. But we're kind of 50-50 on that. And in this case, it did happen. So the Panthers went with Bryce Young. So early notes on the quarterbacks here, boys. Justin, will start with you. Bryce Young to the Panthers and Anthony Richardson to the Colts.
I thought that they were both the right moves. I mean, I wasn't sure that Anthony Richardson is going to be that guy. But if you have fallen in love with a quarterback and you think that this is your guy, then you got to take him. And Anthony Richardson obviously was that guy for the Indianapolis Colts. Bryce Young, you're right. He's the quintessential guy. There is nothing that's going to change between to the now and the first day of the season. He just was the best quarterback prospect that they had. The only knock on him is his height. And the last time that we saw a quarterback whose really the only knock was his height was Russell Wilson, who ended up winning a Super Bowl in Seattle. So, his height made him drop to the third round. So we'll see. We'll see if Carolina can put it together. I do like their offensive line. I think it played well last year. They've made some moves to bring in weapons for him. The offensive coaching staff is brought in to groom a young quarterback. And we'll see if the Carolina Panthers can put it together, because that's a weak division. That's one division where any of those teams can win. I mean, I would think the Saints are the favorite, but would you be really shocked if the Saints didn't win their division next year? No. So let's see if they can put it together.
Very much so. Very much so. And I think kind of with you, Justin, like the whole thing with the quarterbacks is at the end of the day, if you do fall in love with the guy and you have that high pick, we already spoke about it, quarterbacks tend to get taken really highly. And I think the good thing about Anthony Richardson is that he is going to get, at least to me, ample time to sit back, because you have Minshew mania there in Indy, and Gardner Minshew is going to get his chance this season to do his thing. And then I believe they still have Nick Foles, if I'm not mistaken. So you have Minshew mania and you have Big Richard Nick Foles there. Those are two quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson, he's not necessarily like, I think most people would agree that obviously potential-wise and ceiling-wise, he's better than both those guys. But I think the value in having those two there to teach him how to act as a pro and how to attack things on a day-to-day basis as the eventual starting quarterback for two guys who, I mean, one of them won a Super Bowl, and he was actually the starter for it. And the other guy, Gardner Minshew, he's, honestly speaking, obviously the Jaguars wanted to get Trevor Lawrence, but he's a decent starting quarterback in pockets of his career here. So it's two guys that Anthony Richardson will get to learn from. And Bryce Young, he'll also have a veteran quarterback there in Andy Dalton to learn from, but probably more obvious is that he's going to be the guy most likely from day one for that. Rick, what are your thoughts about either of the selections? Any more to add on those two picks?
Yeah, I agree with you that I think Bryce Young is going to be the guy in Carolina from day one. I mean, I think that makes that room is a little more interesting now in that division, because you have Bryce Young, you have Desmond Ridder, you have Baker Mayfield, I guess, in Tampa, and then Derek Carr. So I think that does make that division a little more wide open. To the point about Anthony Richardson, I think it's not so much falling in love with the guy as much as it's what fits the system best. And Shane Steichen has worked with Justin Herbert when he was a rookie that came out, Jalen Hurts as well. But I want to throw this little nugget at you. And if you're a student of history of the game, then what I'm about to say to you is really going to throw you for a loop. Shane Steichen was an offensive quality control coach in 2013 with the Cleveland Browns. They had 3 starting quarterbacks throw for 300 yards that season. It was the first, in the game. It was the first time in franchise history that they had 3 quarterbacks on separate occasions throw for 300 yards. Jason Campbell, Brian Hoyer, Brandon Weeden. If you're a student of the game and Shane Steichen made magic with those 3 yokels, if you're Anthony Richardson, you got to love the fact that you're working with this guy, because he's 37. He's a young guru, basically. And he worked with 2 of the best young quarterbacks in the game leading up to working with you. So, yeah, take the seasoning. Take all the time you need to get ready, because when Minshew magic does finally run out, and when Big Richard, shrinks down to size, and when Sam Ehlinger goes away because he's terrible, that's when Anthony Richardson is going to take over. And they just drafted Will Mallory from Miami as a tight end. So that's going to make that room even better, more weapons for them to throw to. Give it time. I think it'll work. Bryce Young starts day 1. Anthony Richardson takes a year, maybe a year and a half, and then he'll be ready to go. But give him time to learn. Absolutely.
You just reminded me that Sam Ehlinger is on the roster still.
Yeah, I know.
How? How's he still there?
Because who wants him? Nobody.
Yeah, fair point. Not even the team that he's on.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. But no, I'm with you guys. We kind of said all we had to really say about the quarterbacks there. Well, at least those quarterbacks. So let's actually, I know we're skipping around a little bit here, but since we're on the position, actually, no, I'm going to save it for when we talk about guys who went down instead. Let's continue to look at the draft in and of itself here very quickly. So we talked about Bryson, we talked about Richardson, we already talked about the Texans. So there's the first 4 picks right off the board. We spoke a bit about Paris Johnson Jr. earlier in the show. Devin Witherspoon to the Seattle Seahawks. Pretty good pick, honestly, if you ask me. And then the Vegas Raiders also go defense with Tyree Wilson. Vegas, most people, I think even us included from the show last week, figured it was going to be quarterback. In fact, it was me last week who, with the 7th overall pick for the Raiders, ended up going with Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon for them. They do not go with him. Now, Seattle, great pickup with Devin Witherspoon. Him and Tariq Woolen is going to be a very, very good quarterback tandem, to say the very least, for a very long time in Seattle. So they got that going on there. So to kind of couple those 2 picks together, which, I mean, if you guys have any extra comments about them, you can. 8th overall is when things got really interesting. And 9th overall, we already spoke a bit about Jalen Carter, but let's talk about the 8th overall pick. Bijan Robinson, to me, was the only first-round running back I would have taken in this class. And he goes 8th overall to the Atlanta Falcons, who, as Rick pointed out like a week or two ago, maybe I'm thinking a little bit more far back, or maybe it was a little bit more far back. When we talked about our guys from last year's draft class, when we were pointing out players, Rick pointed out that the Falcons did draft, was he a 4th or 5th round pick, Rick?
5th round guy.
5th round pick, who ended up rushing for over 1,000 yards for them. Yeah. And they end up going Bijan Robinson 8th overall. Rick, your thoughts about either of the picks I mentioned with Witherspoon and Wilson, and then Bijan Robinson to Atlanta. Again, I don't hate the fact that Bijan was a first-round running back, but Atlanta at number 8 was not where I would have mocked them, obviously.
So let me quickly talk. Witherspoon, excellent pick. Surprising that they went for a corner, because I think Wilson would have been a good fit there too. Wilson going to 7 to the Raiders, not shocking at all. He and Max Crosby will be a great tandem on the defensive line. This Bijan Robinson pick, like you said, is kind of where things went off the rails a little bit. And it showed when Jahmyr Gibbs went 12 to the Lions too. The running backs in this draft class weren't rated as highly as other players were, but they were still rated pretty highly. And look, Bijan Robinson is absolutely an athlete and a stud. Does it diversify their offense? Yes, it does in a way. But if I'm the Atlanta Falcons, Tyler Algier, who I guess that's how his name is pronounced now, because Allgeier is not good enough for him. It's Algier, whatever. Did rush for over 1,000 yards last year. He and Cordero Patterson combined for 1,700 yards on the ground. Their wide receiver room could have used a little bit of extra help here. So this is where I thought maybe we could have seen a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba go instead. And it was, what it was? It was a total flip. The wide receivers we thought were going to go higher, they went lower. The running backs we thought were going to go lower, they went higher. So it's a question mark here. On overall athletic talent, I think Bijan Robinson may be one of the more talented offensive players in this draft class. And I think it's an absolute godsend. It does nullify Cordero Patterson's running game a little bit, because now you're probably going to run him back to being a slot receiver or a jet sweep receiver, where he was filling in as like the electric second running back in a way. So I think you're going to see Algier and Robinson fight for carries. I think Bijan's going to win out. I think, it's a thank you for your service, Tyler Algier, but now you're now the number 2 back. We have our future back now in this guy. Let's see if it works, because were there other needs they could have gone with? I think sure. And you see, based upon the fact that they drafted Matthew Bergeron, they could have gone with Peter Skoronski here instead. And I think I had them going Peter Skoronski, I believe. That might have been a better pick for them. But listen, we'll see what Arthur Smith does with this embarrassment of riches in the running back room. But I was a little stunned by it, but I can get behind it if Bijan Robinson turns into a stud.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, like, who's going to end up being the guy? Like, I don't think it's an option. You draft a running back that high up, he has to become the guy. So yeah. As you said, Algier, like, he had a great season last year. Cordell Patterson has really revitalized himself with Atlanta as just a weapon overall. Mm-hmm. You draft a running back that high, he has to be the guy. And he, like, I don't think it's any question who's going to be I don't think it should be a question. It's talking about putting yourself in a position. You've now put yourself in a position. Bijan has to become the number 1 guy coming out. So
Well,
we have that.
To that point, too, the one knock that I have on Algier is that he only rushed for 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
In a 1,000-yard season to rush for 3 touchdowns. Now, again, is that a problem with Desmond Ritter's ability and the play calling? Maybe. But if you're a running back that knows how to get to the end zone like Bijan Robinson does, you can absolutely change that. It can make that offense hum a little bit better.
Yeah. Very, very, very much true. Justin, any thoughts on what we talked about?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Sproncy, I think, might have been a better pick there. It might have helped their entire offense more. But you're not going to get a guy like Bijan Robinson again unless you're doing exactly what the Texans did and trading up and trading your entire not your entire future because they had a bunch of extra picks, but a lot of picks to move up and pick directly after where you're picking. There's no guarantee he's going to be there with your next pick. So I wouldn't say I'm surprised. I did see it in mocked a couple times. There was rumors that Atlanta was absolutely in love with Bijan Robinson. We'll see how it works out because they went offensive skill positions in the last 3 drafts in the first round.
Yeah.
High picks, all top 10 picks. So maybe they can make it out of the top 10 now.
Yeah, well, the theory that I've seen is that if, let's say, the Falcons end up bombing this season, which, look, all due respect to the quarterback room, it's Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. If they do end up falling this season and are still high up their team next year, Drake May and Caleb Williams are right there. And then you're telling me that Caleb Williams or Drake May will walk into a situation of Drake London, Pitts, and Bijan Robinson? That's a pretty good skill position group, along with an offensive line, with a left tackle there, with Chris Lindstrom there, with Caleb McGarry there. That's pretty good. Like, if these quarterbacks fail, the next quarterback is going to walk into a not that bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's my bad, Rick. It's almost like the Falcons, like with Bijan Robinson, of course, talented. It's almost like a highly talented running quarterback could have worked in Atlanta. You know, like a quarterback who's won an MVP, could maybe do something with his legs. If maybe they were interested in that, nah.
Did you see how fast he ran off the field at the college football semifinal? You're talking about Robert Griffin III, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the thing too is that, but each one of those picks by the Falcons of those top 10 of those skill positions have come with a little bit of question marks too. Kyle Pitts was taken 4th. Tight ends don't normally go that high, so that was a big question mark. Drake London last year had a lot of problems holding on to the football. He lost all 3 fumbles that he made. So maybe things get right here, but you know, you're going for flash over substance, looks like. But maybe Bijan's that guy that can balance both of them out.
Yeah. Well, I personally think Bijan Robinson has plenty of substance to him, but we'll see. So there's the Falcons there. I mean, you guys mentioned Peter Skoronski, and that was the pick that Rick personally made in the mock last week. So some offensive linemen went up here in a little bit. I wouldn't say a run necessarily, but Darnell Wright ended up going to the Chicago Bears. Interesting pick to say the very least. I don't necessarily disagree with, this was my analysis of it. Right position focus. Not sure it was the exact guy, but hey, I spoke highly of Darnell Wright last week in our mock. So I don't hate the player at all. Maybe the pick is definitely higher than what I've seen him mocked. I cannot think of a mock that I saw going into the last couple of weeks that I saw him going top 10. But hey, the Bears do it. Skoronski went number 11 to the Tennessee Titans. I know Tennessee Titans weren't I know some Tennessee Titans fans that seeing on social media, they weren't necessarily fans of the pick. A lot of people were calling a Mike Vrabel pick. Look, I get it. I definitely do. But considering what you ended up doing in the second round in terms of having backup at a certain position, and Peter Skoronski is a very good player. I think Titans fans being upset about it. This is a guy that I hope, I spoke about it earlier. I think a lot of people are projecting the guard spot. I think if they keep him at guard, I think it'll be fine. I think if they force him to play left tackle, I think that could be the iffy thing. And if he plays well, he plays well. If he doesn't, well, that's an organization failing a player. And look, when a second-rate organization ends up failing a player, I mean, you got to expect that sometimes. But he went there. Offensive lineman-wise, still here. Pittsburgh Steelers went with Broderick Jones at 14th overall, not Joey Porter Jr., who they actually ended up getting in the second round. So they got both a position need fill, and they got nepotism in the organization. So just an A-plus class for the Pittsburgh Steelers all around, just the first 2 picks alone at that aspect. But obviously, guys, there's a certain pick made here by an AFC North team that we got to discuss, which I'm obviously meaning Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. But in all actuality, Lucas Van Ness is a pretty good pick right there. I was beating the drum about the Green Bay Packers needing more pass rush on the team, especially because Rashawn Gary got hurt last season, and they didn't really have much else aside from him on the pass rush front. So I think Lucas Van Ness will be a very nice addition to the team. And shout out to Lucas Van Ness, by the way. A lot of these guys, their significant others, their girlfriends, smoke shows. And Lucas Van Ness was one of those guys. I'm just saying, Lucas Van Ness was one of those guys. Just saying.
He's single, ladies.
Not for long. Anyways, Rick, your AFC North team from last year.
My NFC North team, you mean?
My bad. The Steelers were your AFC North team, so that's why I was thinking of it. Your NFC North team from last year. You picked this team to win the division. You picked this team to lose in the first round of the playoffs last year.
I did.
You rode this team the whole way.
I did.
You sung the praises of Man Campbell.
I did.
I think we all did, really.
Oh, yeah.
And the Lions traded back with the Cardinals, as we mentioned. So not the biggest thing. Get an extra second round pick, a little bit of extra depth. And with the 12th overall pick in this draft, Jahmyr Gibbs for the Detroit Lions. And not only that, with the 18th overall pick, a guy who a lot of mocks no longer rated in the top first as in the first round as the draft process continued. And if I were to look at our draft from last week, he went 43rd overall in our mock, selected by
Justin. Stolen from me.
Yes, he did. There were a lot of picks stolen from you,
of course,
in last week's mock, in part because of the 31st overall selection made. But irregardless, the Detroit Lions with the picks of Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. Now, I think there are some mid-round picks they made that I like. I actually do like Brian Branch to them in the second round. I was very much beating the drum of Brian Branch in our mock. They also got Sam Laporta out of Iowa, the tight end, who they definitely needed a tight end, which, I mean, you want to talk about Georgia for the Eagles, just Iowa tight ends for the Detroit Lions because TJ Hawkinson was the last one. He was the Iowa guy. So Iowa tight end you, some people would argue. You have those two guys there for the Lions in terms of selections that they make. And then you go deep into the draft. I'm trying to look at, they didn't make it in the third round. Was there a pick in the fourth round?
No, they had 2 in the third round. That's when they picked Hooker.
Yes, Hendon Hooker.
Then they came back into the third round for Broderick Martin, the D-tackle over Western Kentucky.
Yes, so they get those two guys. You could maybe argue pretty good value on those later picks, and Hendon Hooker ends up going to the Detroit Lions. But I got to say, man, gut reaction that I had to those Lions picks, if I had to rate just their first round, I got to say D, maybe F. I didn't like either of those picks.
Really?
Those are not two guys that I personally had in the first round. I didn't have either of them as first round picks.
Well, so I think the Jahmyr Gibbs pick was a bit of an overreaction to Bijan Robinson going that high. I think the Lions kind of went, I think they were looking running back, but I think when Robinson went 8, they wanted to make sure they got their guy, and Jahmyr Gibbs, I guess, was their guy. And it's interesting because they traded away a guy who is a similar mold to DeAndre Swift. They did that trade today. So it replaces DeAndre Swift with a guy who's a little more electric, I think, and can he's 5'9", but his speed is there. It's an interesting move for them. I'm surprised Jack Campbell went in the first round as well. I'm surprised he was the second linebacker taken. Also surprised by the first linebacker taken, but another conversation for another day, maybe 5 minutes from now. Look, we talk about this. You know, I do my research and I do my due diligence as well as you guys do. I love Jack Campbell. I thought that he was an excellent player in Iowa. You know, my thing is that I loved AJ Epinesa coming out too, but he fell, and rightfully so. You know, he hasn't really done a whole lot for Buffalo. The Lions did sign Alex Anzalone to a 3-year contract, so they've got him and they've got Jack Campbell now with Aiden Hutchinson. I think it makes a good tandem, but I think the thing that we're all missing here is that you just mentioned that the Lions had 6 picks in the first 3 rounds, 2 in each first, second, and third round. So they had a little bit of room to play with, if you will. Their second round was a lot better. I agree with you in that Brian Branch going and Sam Laporta going. Laporta is the replacement for Hawkinson. I think that's a huge thing there. Even the third round guys, Hooker's an older rookie, but he's a good guy. And Broderick Martin from a smaller school like Western Kentucky, I think can be a really good run stuffer. So I think you can kind of be forgiven if you're trying to reach and swing for the fences here. But I think, like I said, I think Gibbs was their guy, but I think he would have gone 18 had it not been for Bijan Robinson going 8. And that's kind of what we talk about. When dominoes start falling in this draft, teams start pushing that panic button to get their guy. What's the Lions did at 12? It definitely is a very high for a second running back. I agree. But I think you kind of see now how it went. Because I think if Gibbs had gone 18, Campbell would have gone in the second round to them, and then Laporta from there, and then on and on and on. So their board shifted once Robinson went 8 based upon fear. And you know what? The Falcons got the Lions good. They really did. Because I think I would probably go with a C on it. I think Gibbs is more of a D pick, but I think Campbell should get a little more credit than I think people are giving him. I think he could be a really good player. He's not going to be a defensive rookie of the year candidate because I think Will Anderson's probably going to win that. But I think that he's a guy that might be, a very talented linebacker in Detroit and someone that I, as a Bears fan, am terrified of going into this season.
If the draft had shaken up, and maybe this would require even more trading up by the Lions portion, if they had maneuvered those third-round picks into getting a third, second-round pick, and you had told me the first 5 Detroit Lions picks would have been Christian Gonzalez, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, and why am I already blanking? Yes, Laporta. If you had told me that, I would have given the Lions an A.
Yeah,
but you overvalue 2 of those guys. Like, take it from me, when you run things based on fear, you cost yourself in a lot of aspects. And the Lions, to me, cost themselves heavily. I can forgive Jahmyr Gibbs if you had taken him 18th overall, if Christian Gonzalez had gone 12th overall, if you had picked him, because he was still on the board, and he was still on the board up until the pick before you, which he was taken by a guy who Justin has had nightmares about. Like, the New England Patriots, if there's one thing that they've done over the last decade, cornerbacks are their thing. Stephon Gilmore, J.C. Jackson, freaking Jones this past season. And now you're not developing a guy, you're not stealing a guy, you're taking a guy who has first-round pedigree and adding him there. I think my dark horse defensive rookie of the year candidate is Christian Gonzalez and what he could do in New England, because you're giving Bill Belichick a number 1 caliber corner to play with. Good God in heaven, what he could do with that. Like, there is, to me, no excuse. I don't see a single team between 12 and 18 that would have taken Jahmyr Gibbs. I just don't see it. And to overdraft Gibbs, even by those selections, and cost yourself a cornerback, which you needed, because this secondary, I can't name you a single Detroit Lions cornerback right now. I can name you a safety now that they got Brian Branch in there, but I can't name you a single cornerback on that team anymore. With this, I'm with you. Second and third round, I get, even with as it is, I do like the selections. I cannot get behind the first round picks in any way, shape, or form with this.
But let me ask you this one question. I know that he switched over to safety, but CJGJ is now in Detroit. Do you think maybe that kind of shifted their draft plans a little bit as well, because they did pick him up and he's now in their secondary, in their defensive backfield? But
do you know what's better than having 1 really good cornerback if they play him at corner? Having 2. Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon.
Well, again, Witherspoon was gone by that time, so yes.
No, but I'm saying Christian Gonzalez was there. You could have had Christian Gonzalez, CJGJ.
But that's the thing. Maybe he wasn't rated as highly as we're anticipating him. Keep in mind this, too. Washington had a perfect opportunity to take him at 16. They took Emmanuel Forbes, which everybody else is also panning as well.
Well, Ron Rivera isn't necessarily like the Washington Redskins.
Gambler.
The Washington Commanders have been hit or miss in some of their picks over the last couple of years.
Or Belichick's like Palpatine with the hood over his head. Good. Pulling the strings on everybody else.
Basically, this is how it goes. Because Bill Belichick, let's just say this outright, the Patriots screwed the Jets over with trading with the Pittsburgh Steelers so this to get Broderick Jones. He did that on purpose, 1,000% in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And when it came to that, I promise you Bill Belichick probably used some Jedi mind tricks on Washington Commanders. I bet you that Bill Belichick called Ron Rivera earlier in the day to check up on him, because I'm sure they've coached against each other. I'm sure they're good friends. And he just, he buttered him up and he confused him. And that made Ron Rivera go with Emmanuel Forbes and not Christian Gonzalez.
Ron, I'm reading the newest issue of Forbes magazine here, and I think it's a good issue for Forbes magazine. Forbes, okay.
Yes, exactly. It's like a Bloody Mary effect where you got him to say Bill Belichick said it 3 times, and now just the name Forbes was in Ron Rivera's name the rest of the day, and he just pounded the table at draft room and said, "I want Emmanuel Forbes for a first round pick."
Or safer for the kids that are watching Beetlejuice, because
exactly
safer for the kids that are watching.
Exactly. And look, I'm not saying this to make fun of Emmanuel Forbes. I'm actually a fan of Emmanuel Forbes. I think he's a pretty good hybrid. I think you could also play him at safety if you need to. I think Emmanuel Forbes has plenty of potential. I think he's the Javon Holland of this draft class for me, Javon Holland from 2 years ago. I was a massive fan of him in the draft. I want to say he went early second round to the Miami Dolphins, if I'm not mistaken. I love Javon Holland then. I love Emmanuel Forbes right now. But I love Christian Gonzalez a lot more. And Christian Gonzalez, CJGJ would have been way better with this. You cannot convince me that taking two guys that were both second-round projected picks and taking both of them in the first round is anything above. Like, I need to see them play. And I understand, like, this is why I say I could stomach the Gibbs pick, because I understand you have to pay DeAndre Swift after this season. I get that. You hit the reset at running back. Totally fine with that. Why does that happen at 12 and not 18? I'm not a fan of it. Justin, what do you have to say about the Lions picks here?
Well, let me just say that I think when you're looking at the draft board that has come through, you're seeing a major difference between what the media projected and what these teams have actually projected. And I think you get that in years where you see a weaker draft. And this was projected to be a weaker draft. As per Lions reporters, they only had a first-round grade on like 12 players. And one of the players that they had a first-round grade on was Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't necessarily think that it's an overreaction to Bijan Robinson, because I don't think you see that at a professional level. I mean, maybe later rounds, but I don't generally think you see that at a professional level. And I think that they were absolutely in love with what this kid could do and what they were looking for Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama. Now, I will say, I think he is an electric playmaker, and I think he can do a lot of things. And I think he is, you're right, pretty close to a mirror of DeAndre Swift, who's had injury concerns and has not been able to stay on the field for them. So if they can have that consistent play out offense, I think it's an excellent pick. I don't see anything wrong with it. If that's how you think your offense is going to run, and you can get a younger, healthier player on a longer contract, someone you're not going to have to pay next year, and you think he's going to do the same thing, then I'm all for it. And I did hear, by the way, that there were two teams in between that 15, I'm sorry, what pick was it? 12?
12 and 18, yeah.
12 and 18.
There were two teams, including my New York Jets, that were supposedly all over him. And had every intention of taking Jahmyr Gibbs before that.
Because the Jets knew that I wasn't a fan anymore, so they could take an Alabama guy in the first round. That's what happened.
Bad teams stay bad for a reason.
You can say that, but let's see what he is when he's on the field. You know, it's possible that he doesn't work out, sure, but this kid seems to be an electric playmaker. He can do all the things that you want a running back to do, including being dynamic, catching the ball out of the backfield. He's not going to have to start immediately from day one, because they did sign David Montgomery, who, by the way, also does have some injury concerns. But we could see Jahmyr Gibbs could be this guy that Williams was for them last year, who had 18 touchdowns in and around the goal line. He's going to be a dynamic pass catcher. He's going to be a dynamic runner inside the red zone. And look, that's how that offense functions. That's how that offense runs. It is a little early, but again, there aren't that many players that they had a first round grade on. And I got to argue, I don't really think that there was a lot of players that I had a first round grade on too. And we did the mock draft, I drafted more based on need than who I thought was going to be the better player, because look, I don't necessarily know that there were that many players that are going to be starters at the end of the day. And another player that I think might be a starter is Jack Campbell out of Iowa. I think that he's one of those players that is dynamic. He can really anchor the center of your defense. And again, I think that they got a lot of players that I projected to go beforehand by the end of the second round. And they did it all while moving back and stocking up on draft picks. I think they had a very good draft so far.
Gibbs, again, I don't hate the Gibbs pick because of you took him ultimately in the first round. If that was your grade on him, I just, between corner and running back, that secondary is going to get torched the hell up next season.
But I think that's what makes a big difference between, as Justin was saying, the draft board that we see on Pro Football Focus or on Bleacher Report or NFL Network versus the draft boards that these teams see, because we're not privy to how the team meetings go. We're not privy to seeing every little tidbit of the pro day and the scouting combine and all of that. And so, it's a case where, there's a matter of fact way we can say, this guy should not have been taken in this pick. You could say that too about a lot of guys that were taken last year as well. I mean, look at the run of receivers last year that was taken. And I'll bring him up. I mean, Jahan Dotson, none of us had as a first-round guy, because the Commanders saw something in him. They wanted him to go first round. They wanted him in that position. They took him there.
They traded up for him.
And he had, by all accounts, a very good rookie season. I mean, so if Jahmyr Gibbs has a very good rookie season, this won't be that much of a reach, And again, like Justin saying, if they only had 12 guys in their board that were a first round grade, that should tell you something as well too. That the Lions are that strict teacher in school that doesn't want to grade properly because they had a bad drive to work or whatever.
They're the Russian judge.
They're the Russian judge or the French judge. No, too.
This isn't the Gruden Raiders, the Gruden Mayock Raiders, where they were taking guys that weren't on the draft board for 3 rounds in anyone's draft board.
Oh, like I did.
Yeah, I mean, wow. If there's a knock on this team, is that they didn't draft a major need in the secondary as to this yet, besides Brian Branch. They have more than just the need for a safety. They could have used cornerbacks, you're right. They could have used, but again, in a weak draft, if you don't have those guys rated, you can't waste a first-round pick. You need your sure thing, and if that's who they believe in, far be it from me. It's not like they drafted, a guy that was projected to go in day 3.
Right.
They projected a guy who was supposed to go late first round, maybe early second round.
Yeah.
So a lot of people.
I just want to see what you guys see in Jack Campbell that I'm not seeing. I still don't see it in him.
Jack Campbell is someone that fell because of the pre-draft process. Mm-hmm. I think maybe he had some issues on his pro day, and this was a guy that was during the season mocked to be a first round pick and kind of just fell as other guys started to rise. I don't even necessarily know if it was a problem for him. When guys rise, ultimately people have to fall. And if you're showing off, and if you are a guy that's having these intangible athletics that you're showing off in your pro day and during the combine, and you rise up, inevitably, whether or not it's for good reasons or bad, someone's going to fall.
Look, I'm surprised, Jerg, that you're not higher up on Campbell because this guy was a Butkus Award winner last year at 118 tackles. Iowa
defensive players have not been what they were projected or said to be, and I think Jack Campbell's going to join that. I don't think AJ Epinesa has failed in Buffalo because of he's so buried on that defensive line. I just don't think it's worked out because I don't think he could make that impact there, and I think Jack Campbell's going to be a second coming of it. Again, if you had gotten Campbell in the second round, I'm all for it. Or maybe if you make the Gibbs pick at 12 and are somehow able to trade up from 18 to 16 or whatever. Who was at 16? The Commanders. Maybe they wouldn't have made that trade, but if you still could have stolen a corner there, maybe Jack Campbell to me. If you had a first round grade on Jack Campbell and not Christian Gonzalez, I need to question your draft board. Like I'm fine with you only think there are 12 first round players, but I don't think Christian Gonzalez.
I don't know who they had first round grades on and who they didn't. All I'm saying is if you had a higher grade on Gibbs and you're not thrilled with your running back room, because let's face it, they lost their 18 touchdown guy from last year.
Yeah, and that's on
And DeAndre Swift is someone that, can't stay healthy. So if you had a running back that you loved and he's there and he's available for you and he does all the things and he ticks all the boxes, offense is what part of the reason they struggled last year. I know that their defense struggled, and I know, but
I was about to say that defense was bad.
They stayed in games, and the games they stayed in, it's because they did it offensively.
Yeah.
Because the defense was non-existent. And then the games that they lost heavily, their offense didn't show up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you look, and that's the reason they missed the playoffs. You look at games like that Patriot game last year where they put up 0 points. They were banged up at running back. They couldn't throw the ball. And, who's the running? Williams.
I look ultimately, they had, unless my numbers are a little bit off here, and admittedly Steiner mathematics are not foolproof, they had a top 5, just in the NFC alone. I'm not including the AFC, but NFC is what matters here. They had a top 5 bottom 5 scoring defense in their division. There was one team that made the playoffs that had points allowed on the season equivalent of them.
But again,
do you want to know who that was? The Minnesota Vikings. And that's part of the reason why I'm pissed off here is because this Detroit Lions first round makes me think that those frauds are going to make the playoffs again. So yes, I'm a little bit mad about Detroit that the Viking frauds are probably going to make the playoffs again.
Hey, you can always join me in Chicago, man. It's doing to for us in Washington last year. You could do it again.
Yeah, no, I made that mistake once. I'm not making that mistake again. All right.
You're no fun.
Before we continue here with the end of the first round, real quick, Justin, on Will McDonald, the 4th, as the Jets first round pick and the first Iowa State player, according to Rick, drafted in the first round in 50 years, which I didn't even know that stat. You guys made history with that pick, to be fair.
I was not thrilled at first. It was someone that I hadn't really known. I didn't see a lot of tape on, but as I've watched, I started to understand why they picked him. I mean, the kid is an athletic freak. He is incredibly long. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he broke Von Miller's sack record last year, which has stood for a long time. The kid can get after the quarterback. It's an area where they were deep last year, but they didn't have a ton of results. They had a lot of good guys. They were very good in pressures, but they didn't really get home enough. And I think that this is a kid that could correct that issue. He's fast. He can drop into coverage if he needs to, but he's going to be a pass rushing specialist for the most part for them. And he can get after the quarterback. His arms are so long. There are videos of him jumping over cars. This kid is an athletic freak, and it's exactly what Robert Saleh was looking for. Again, when I went back to this Aaron Rodgers trade, I think their defense is going to be improved this year because they might be playing with a lead, and they might be playing, and they're not going to be on the field as nearly as much. So it's almost like a rich get richer kind of thing. Almost, I don't want to compare them to the Eagles because they're obviously an NFC East champion. I'm sorry, NFC champion.
Well, technically both are correct.
Yeah, no, I know. But look, he's almost comparable to that Jalen Carter pick where the rich get richer. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a comparable prospect to Jalen Carter, but maybe it's bias coming on for me, but I see what they did, and I the more I see about this kid, the more I like him. So,
Judas, if you were still with the Jets, how would you have felt about the pick?
Well, he's the guy that I picked in the second round of the Texans because I also like him too. I think that he's a very athletic player who will do a lot of great things for them. I mean, this is an all Big 12 selection as a sophomore. So he's a guy that's very talented. So I think what the deal was too is that if you look at how the Jets drafted in the second round too, since we're pulling the curtain back, they went with a center and Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin. Now, putting your theory to the test here, if they had drafted Joe Tippmann in the first round, how would you? I'm not a closet Jets supporter, Joe. Nice try. No. Do you see what he did to my name tag? My name plate on the bottom.
Oh, closet Jets supporter.
Yeah.
If they would have picked Tippmann in the first round, is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm asking Jurg too because Jurg had his Jahmyr Gibbs issue. So if they had picked Tippmann, who was a center prospect, and I think arguably the best center prospect in this draft, if they had gone from the middle of the first round, I think that would have been an overreach. I mean there were other good centers too. John Michael Schmitz from the Giants and Luke Whipler from Ohio State, who's still I think on the draft boards. So I think what at this point they wanted Broderick Jones, they didn't get Broderick Jones. Anton Harrison would have been the next tackle chosen, but it would have been too high up for him. Same with Tippmann. So they went with athletic ability and their best available player, which on their draft board was a guy in Will McDonald who early in the process had been a mid to late first round draft pick, but then fell towards the end because everyone else started rising up. But he's still a very talented player. And you're right. The jumping ability is incredible.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, Rick. The rise up also purely from a media standpoint.
Absolutely.
Because as much as we want to think we know what we're talking about, every year the draft proves that we don't.
No, I mean, look.
Every year. There are guys we get right.
Yeah.
There are guys that clearly nobody's on, and all of a sudden they come into the league and they play great.
Yep, absolutely. So and now the only thing that I will say is that this does seem like an embarrassment of riches for the Jets at that D tackle position because of Quinnen Williams there and Will McDonald. So it will help them, and I think they're still
McDonald is going to be an edge.
Well, I know he's going to be an edge, but I mean, it does seem like there's you drafted Jermaine Johnson last year, you have John Franklin Myers, so Michael Brockers last year was another pick too. So there's definitely a lot of competition on that D line. Competition can breed a lot of good things, and you know what too? I'll put this out there to you as well. Will McDonald could drop back and be a linebacker. He could be a 6'4" like edge linebacker too, and a good 3-4 system. I can't say that about Franklin Myers or Quinnen Williams, but I can definitely say that about Will McDonald. So if you can change him around and make him lanky and make him a real lanky linebacker, it's not a bad idea. And it really wasn't a bad pick for them.
Agreed. Very much agreed. Anyways.
Yeah, I did. I picked him 34th. What do you want from me?
Technically 33rd because there was a first round pick that got forfeited there. Anyway,
he's still tampering my phone.
All right. Kalijah Cansey went to the Buccaneers at 19-5. Love that selection. We had a wide receiver run here with 4 straight wide receivers in a row. Jackson Smith and Jigba going to the Seahawks at the 20th overall pick. No pressure on the kid. He gets DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett to play under and to learn under. That's a good pick there. Again, another wide receiver who gets to learn from veterans in Quentin Johnson to the Los Angeles Chargers. So you got that. Zay Flowers to the Baltimore Ravens and Jordan Addison. I almost said Allison there. Jordan Addison to the Minnesota Vikings. So a run of 4 straight wide receivers there. Probably not. Who knows if it affected the Giants? Maybe a lot of people were saying that the Giants probably could have and should have gone wide receiver in the first round. I believe last week I did have Jordan Addison to the Giants in our mock. So nearly close there.
I have to disagree with you there.
You think they were going to go? Hold on, let me real quick. I'm a Deontay Banks fan, but I'm just saying a lot of people thought Giants wide receiver was going to be the way to go.
Jordan Ron on ESPN on draft day, and I heard this interview going to my round of 18 that I was playing golf up in the northern part of Long Island. He said the Giants should take Deontay Banks because, look, I agree with you. Wide receiver was a big need for them, but they got their guy in the 3rd round when they drafted Jalen Hyatt, which is a steal. But they needed a corner just as badly because they need somebody to pair with Adoree Jackson. And I'm sorry, he played okay last year, but Cordell Flott was not the answer. So they got Deontay Banks, and that's a gift because, again, you saw all those corners go. Like you said with Detroit, maybe they needed the corner. The Giants desperately needed somebody in their defensive backfield. And I think this was the best guy they could have gotten for them.
Oh, agreed. Again, I'm a massive Deontay Banks fan going into the draft, probably more so than most. I saw people putting him in the 2nd round. To me, he was a 1st-round pick. I don't understand any reason to why to make him fall as that low. But hey, some people put the wrong guys lower. Jack Campbell. Anyways, Dalton Kincaid going to the Buffalo Bills with the 25th overall pick. Tight end, according to Justin in the chat, Dawson Knox. Your days are numbered in Buffalo there, bud. Mozzie Smith going to the Dallas Cowboys there. So the Dallas Cowboys are 1,000% against Justin's plan of keeping Texas players in state and helping them on moving costs.
It's the right position.
Yeah, just wrong school. Anton Harrison goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars, in part because the Jaguars, some offensive line hits, not only with Jawan Taylor, who left the team to go for greener pastures, literally, with the Kansas City Chiefs, both in terms of money and success. But also Cam Robinson is going to be suspended for a unnamed amount of time due to a PD violation from what I read about literally yesterday. And I actually learned about that yesterday. So there was that. Miles Murphy going to the Bengals at 28th. Again, I think this is a pro Miles Murphy show. It's a steal at 28. I still wish they would have gone secondary, but hey, if you're going to tell me you're going to go pass rusher instead, I don't necessarily hate that. Brian Breesy to the New Orleans Saints is relatively close to what we had him going to, but Breesy to the Saints, it made sense because they lost a couple guys on the defensive side in the offseason. Ironically, a couple of them going to Atlanta in Onyemata being one of them, so they get a D tackle there. Nolan Smith, as we kind of mentioned earlier on in the show, goes to the Georgia Eagles / Philadelphia Bulldogs. And then Uzoma goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. So from Kansas State to Kansas City, Missouri, not that far of a distance, honestly. So good on him. Some 1st-round pick late in the draft got, to save a little bit on moving cost. So, follow the Justin method, ladies and gentlemen. Any notes on any of these last 1st-round picks we went through here, boys? I know we went through a lot of them, but any in particular that stood out to you?
Well, Kansas City whiffed on their 31st overall pick. I'm just going to put it out there for you. No, I'm kidding. Look, I think Felix Anudike-Uzomah is going to be a star for them. I think you pair him with George Karlaftis. I know they signed somebody in free agency. Who was it? Charles Omenihu. They signed in free agency. So he can be the 3rd, DN there. I think it's a great story too for him. Being a local kid from Kansas City, born and raised, stayed home. Is going to his hometown team. That I think you saw how the Chiefs fans were loving it because they knew that was the guy they could have taken, and it worked out for them. I think for me, the Brian Bresee draft choice, I think a lot of the reason why, he kind of fell in certain drafts was because there was a lot of outside factors on him. The injury, the familial, passings that he had to contend with and deal with, and even when he was drafted, you saw that in his house with his family, how they were. I think a lot of that is conjecture. I mean, if Brian Bresee is right, he will be a star in New Orleans. No question in my mind. And I think that he is going to be right. I think that he's a guy that's going to absolutely be a stud for them. So I think that was an excellent pick by them too. And sneakily, I love the Anton Harrison pick for Jacksonville because I had them going Osiris Torrance. They went Anton Harrison, similar position on the line. Got to protect Trevor Lawrence at all costs in Jacksonville. If Trent Baalke does one thing right, is protect Trevor Lawrence with guys that, don't get suspended. So Anton Harrison.
Or
you're up, buddy.
Leaving free agency. Which,
Sure.
I mean, to give the Jaguars credit, they've done a decent job with Cam Robinson, with Jawan Taylor, who ended up becoming a guy that another team paid $80 million to in free agency. So they've been doing something right in terms of developing some tackles there. So,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, ththose are Rick's thoughts. Justin, any thoughts on any of those picks before we move on?
I got to say, I wish we would have talked a little bit more about the receivers. I loved that little run that we had. Yeah, that's true.
Justin, you could bring it up now.
And just the fits that came in. I mean, in Jackson Smith and Jigba, it's going to be an excellent slot addition. In Seattle, he's exactly what they were missing in the passing game. He's going to be that underneath route that really is going to free up DK Metcalf and
Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, he's on my fantasy team. I still don't know why I can't remember.
Clearly, he's not going to be on your team next year, I guess.
Maybe we'll see. And then you guys know how I felt about Quentin Johnson. I think he's the best player in this draft. He's the best, wide receiver in this draft. I think his talent was underrated because he played on a team in TCU. But, I mean, you saw what he did against Ohio State and Michigan. He was the only offense on that team. They were doing everything they could to scheme him to get him the ball at any way possible, and he still lit the teams up. Zay Flowers is going to bring exactly what they've been missing since they traded away Hollywood Brown last year. He's an excellent fit, and he will be an excellent number one-ish player next to Odell. And it's exactly what Lamar has been needing from the Ravens. So let's see if they can get that passing game back on track. And then Jordan Addison is going to play next to Justin Jefferson, guys.
Yeah.
And with the real potential ultimately of maybe if he balls out, this is a big if, but if he balls out becoming the number 2 receiver on that team because Adam Thielen's not there anymore. Now, KJ Osborne might have something to say about that, but at the same time, there's that. And also with the Zay Flowers move that you mentioned, Justin, even aside from the Hollywood Brown thing, the post-draft analysis about his selection, only the Bears had fewer receptions among wide receivers last season than the Baltimore Ravens did.
Well, that's because Cole Kmet's phenomenal. Let's be honest here. But look, here's what I'll say too about the Zay Flowers thing. Devin Duvernay is going to come back from injury. Rashad Bateman's going to come back from injury. You have those 2 guys plus Mark Andrews plus Odell plus Zay Flowers
plus Nelson Aguilar.
No, forget Nelson Aguilar.
There's a reason why I'm forgetting Nelson Aguilar. This is an anti-Nelson Aguilar guy right here. Listen, Lamar, for all those years, was saying, I don't have weapons. Well, Lamar, you've got 5 guys to throw the ball to, and J.K. Dobbins can run the ball. So there you go. There's 6.
The big thing you pointed out to a lot of those guys was coming back healthy. Odell Beckham Jr., who needs to hopefully come back healthy. Like, there's a lot of health factors with those guys.
Sure.
Right, to be fair. And the Baltimore Ravens medical staff, I'm going to be real with you, they've been kind of shaky over the last couple of years.
Well,
I'm just saying.
There's room for every C- med student in an NFL. You know what you call the guy
Miami Dolphins medical staff.
You know what you call the guy who finished last in his medical school? Doctor. There you go.
Fair. Is there? Okay. All right. I don't know enough about med school to ask the question of does the guy that finished last really still become a doctor? But
yes, he does because he completed the degree. He's a doctor.
Fair shout. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the second round here because there were a couple guys I felt. I don't think there was, kind of like Justin said, when there's not a draft class that is necessarily like strength in it, that I don't necessarily think on paper there were so many guys that necessarily fell out of the first round. There were a couple, in my opinion. Joey Porter Jr., I think, again, Steelers, you got both your need and you got nepotism. I think this was an amazing draft for them, just in an internal possession or internal basis. Michael Mayer and Sam Laporta go back-to-back at 34 and 35. So really, not only was Michael Mayer not the first tight end taken, he was not even the second tight end taken. He ended up being the third guy taken, but he goes to the Vegas Raiders, who did need someone because, as we know, Josh McDaniels does not love, and he will trade you on your after your wedding. So I hope, Michael Mayer, you're not getting married anytime soon, there, kid. Steve Avila to the Rams, I think, was a phenomenal pick on the interior. They needed help on the offensive line. I think that was amazing there by the Rams, who, funny enough, Derek Hall, defensive player to Seattle, the next pick, and then Mathieu Bergeron going to Atlanta with their selection in the second round here. But of course, with the other selections, and you go have BJ Ojulari going with Cardinals, which if I'm not mistaken, if I look back at our draft last week, BJ Ojulari, he ended up actually going to the Cardinals with Justin's pick in the second round. So Justin nailed it.
That's a hit.
That's a hit.
We're playing Battleship, boys, and that's a hit.
there's a good hit for you, Justin. But obviously, I know we could talk about a lot of things like the Green Bay Packers, continuing to packer and going with back-to-back tight ends with some selections here. Jartavius Martin going to the Commanders. There's a lot of different picks that we could go with here. Before we get to picks that we liked in the second and third round, just one or two extra ones for each of us. Let's talk about the big fall. Because Rick mentioned later that Humpty Dumpty had sat on a wall and Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Well, Will Levis sat in that draft room. And man, oh man, did he have a fall not seen from a quarterback going into the second round since the likes of Geno Smith out of West Virginia. Will Levis goes from first round to second round, drafted 33rd overall by the Tennessee Titans. So another quarterback that Ryan Tannehill will not mentor there. But ultimately a young quarterback nonetheless. So if Tennessee Titans fans, if you wanted a quarterback to develop, you got him. And you maybe got him with a better overall value pick than you could have been drafting him higher up. So you got both a tackle and a quarterback, or guard and quarterback, excuse me. What were your makings, Justin? Let's start with you. I think we could all agree in terms of guys that we've thought of, that most people thought of, and maybe this is another media projection versus actual NFL teams and what their boards are. Will Levis fell in this draft, plain and simple, I think, according to most. Now, I personally didn't rate him as a first-round pick going into this, so maybe not for me, but let's go. Your thoughts on him going to the Titans at 33 and just his drop overall.
Let's talk about the Titans draft as a whole. They are doing what they can to revamp this offense. Their defense was not bad last year. They had their issues, but if Derrick Henry gets hurt again, which he is a 30-year-old running back now who's very physical and has a history of injury, they can't sacrifice their entire year because one player got hurt. So what they're doing is they drafted Skoronski, which I think is going to be a big help for Derrick Henry because maybe he can make it better back to the line without getting hit as much this year, which was a major issue last year. And then they drafted Will Levis in the second round, which you're right, value-wise, he's exactly what they are looking for in that position and at that round. They did trade up a couple spots to grab him, but he could be exactly what they need. Look, they're designed to throw the ball over the top. And who better to do that and who's got a better arm than arguably the best arm talent in the draft this year in Will Levis. I mean, the dude is strong. He could throw the ball a mile, and he can be accurate downfield. Now, there are obviously some issues and concerns, but he's a big, tough prospect. He'll stay in the pocket. He has the ability to run if needed, like Ryan Tannehill has made a career of finger rolling the ball from the red zone. And look, his player comparison is Josh Allen. If he can be anywhere near that, the Titans are going to be a good team for a long time to come, even when Derrick Henry leaves. They did also draft a running back to back him up and a tight end who can help block and still catch the ball out of the backfield, which is something they've been missing for a long time. I really like their draft this year, Jerk. I know you don't like to hear that, but I think if they hit on some of these picks, especially the quarterback, maybe they could stay relevant for a little bit longer.
Look, there's a misconception here, clearly. When Ryan Tannehill leaves this team, I will stop caring about the Titans, and they won't get my ire anymore. Until then,
I don't believe you.
No, I don't care about them.
Either.
I will not care about them after Tannehill leaves.
You already got some backstory, Jerk, about why you don't like the Titans. You'll find hate for Will Levis. I promise.
No, not really.
I promise.
Not
he will
really.
be the bane of your existence.
I will say this. Part of the reason of my ire for the Titans no longer shows up on my Twitter feed, so that helps.
It's funny. I got a text here from my Chicago Bears friend Adam Rank, who said, I guess because he's watching, he said, Will Levis, future Titans Ring of Honor candidate, bro, because you made the Geno Smith comparison. So I guess
Don't you dare!
He's just doing
Will Levis.
Hey, you made the comparison. You opened that door. You opened that door, Jared. This is on you.
I'm pretty sure I heard it from you
This is
first.
on you.
Don't you dare!
This is on you.
I said there was a slide. I did not say their skill level would be anywhere near. If Will Levis even, has a season like Geno Smith had, that'd be a success for him.
Look,
Don't you dare.
So
The Seahawks Ring of Honor is prestigious.
yeah, of course it is. The Titans Ring of Honor is not. In truth,
It's not.
the value on this was incredible for them. And look, Tannehill's 34 years old, so he's probably on his way out soon. And we just saw reports like a couple weeks ago that Malik Willis has fallen heavily out of favor with the Titans. So, yeah, new GM. So that quarterback room is bare. So maybe Levis is the guy, or maybe he's not. But you have to throw somebody in there, And at that pick, a guy who was projected by many wrong media members, us included, to be a top 10 guy, falls to you at 33, 34. You were in this draft. You clicked the button that said Will Levis was the top 10 pick.
I did not. I was not the one that drafted him.
You weren't the one that drafted him, but you were the one that clicked that button and said Will Levis.
I said all during the mock. I didn't think he was a first round.
You didn't. Wait. You said you didn't like Will Levis, but you thought he would go in the first round.
Hold on. There's a difference between what I think will happen based on what NFL teams will do versus what I think would happen, what I would do. Will Levis, if I was making a legitimate draft board, wouldn't not even have sniffed my first round.
The mayo and coffee thing was a joke, right? So we can stop that bias completely.
It's not even about that. I was not a fan of baby Zach Wilson, and clearly NFL teams weren't in the first round either.
I mean, look, I will give you this. He does sound like a Jordan Belfort trust fund bro because, he's a Massachusetts kid who clearly had money, went to Penn State, couldn't hack it behind Sean Clifford, then had to go to Kentucky to make his name going. So fine, if you want to go for that, I agree with you there. But at the same time, I will say, a couple weeks ago when we did our mock draft and Justin did make that pick, you were the one controlling the mock draft that still clicked Will Levis into the top 10. So you do have some fault in this yourself.
Tanner McKee. I also let you willingly pick Tanner McKee, which I gave you an out. I said, Rick, I will redo the entire PFF.
No, because then our show would have gone 5 hours long and that'd be ridiculous. We all have lives.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. Okay. I will speak for myself then.
I don't have one.
Hey, you had Chick-fil-A on Thursday. That's a life.
That was glorious.
Yes, it was.
That was glorious.
There you go.
Ah, beautiful, beautiful. All right, as I reminisce about Chick-fil-A and now wonder what I'm going to have for dinner tonight, let's wrap up the draft talk here. Boys, it could even be someone in the 4th or 5th round that's been selected today. But give me like 1 or 2 non-first round picks that you're a massive fan of.
Besides Will Levis?
You're about to be the reason why I continue the Tennessee Titans hatred because once Tannehill's gone, I don't care about them anymore.
Please continue it.
When Russell Wilson retires and when Ryan Tannehill leaves the Titans, I need to find a new team to harp on.
I'm sure you'll find the team. Let's be real here.
Yeah,
okay, so I will tell you that there's a guy that I had picked that, I had written down that was a guy that I didn't select because reasons. But he's a guy that I thought was a very interesting selection, possibly. That's the guy the Patriots took in the 3rd round at 76, Marte Mapu, the inside linebacker from Sacramento State. I think that he's very versatile, and I think it's going to help that Patriots defense out really well because he's a guy that was in college at Sacramento State. He was a safety, but he's got a linebacker type build. So he's a guy that can possibly do both, in a similar way to like a Jabril Peppers almost, but with a little bit more talent that Jabril Peppers, I think, does. So, and, I think that he's a guy that's going to really fit into that system quite nicely for them. I liked him. I didn't have the guts to pull off a pick for him because there were other guys that I wanted to give a little more shout to. But I think that he's a guy that could steal a starting spot for the Patriots on their linebacking core if he has a really good camp, which I think he will, because I think he's got that FCS chip on his shoulder that will give him a little more of a talent mindset there. That's my defensive guy. And, I'm sorry, Jurg, I hate to do this to you, but I think Tyjae Spears from the Titans is a great pick as well. Because, look, Derrick Henry's the king is coming to the end of his reign. So having Tyjae Spears there to spell him and be that guy who can do a lot and be shifty and electric is going to change the dynamic on Tennessee's defense. So in 1 year, you could go from Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry to the next year going to Will Levis and Tyjae Spears.
Good.
I think it's good for them. I think it's a good cleansing of the unpalatable hatred that you have for this team. So,
it's perfect because when Tannehill's out of there, I will not care and I can stop caring. And I can't wait for that day to finally come true.
I know.
Justin, let's follow Rick's lead here. One offensive and one defensive guy that you liked that were non-first round picks.
Okay.
I have mine if you need a little bit more time.
No. I have certainly have my offensive one. I'm going to go with Jalen Hyatt. I think that it is was an absolute steal in the third round for the Giants. It is exactly what they were looking for and exactly what they were missing. Did you know the Giants were the last place team last year in plays over 20 yards?
Yeah.
Jalen Hyatt is a big play machine. It's what he's built for. And it's finally a guy with some good hands. I really think that the Giants made an excellent pick there. And I think that he can be there for years to come and hopefully connect with Daniel Jones on a couple of big time plays for them, because it's really, really what they need. Defensively, outside the first round, because I was going to say Mazi Smith, because I think it's an excellent meeting for them. But you know what? Let's go with the first pick outside the first round, and that would be Joey Porter Jr., a guy who a lot of us projected to go really early on. It's a need for them, and it's just an excellent fit, I think, to have him in that secondary. It's just scary for that defense, man, to think that it keeps getting better. It was the highlight of their year last year, was the defense, and the offense was starting to get going a little bit towards the end. Now let's see if they can, since they made some off-season additions, that offense can get going, and that defense will be really scary once again.
And you think, too, with both of them, I mean, with the Giants, with Jalen Hyatt, they got Jamison Crowder and Paris Campbell in free agency this year. Those don't really move the needle like Hyatt will. I think that's huge for them. And for Joey Porter, they have Patrick Peterson, the Steelers do, and he's 34. And their other corner is Levi Wallace, who's definitely not a CB1. So Joey Porter Jr. is going to fit that note. And you know what? The best thing that I saw from yesterday, I don't know if you saw the celebrations that they had. They have a Joey Porter t-shirt saying "They shot me in Denver," which is the greatest t-shirt I've ever seen. I love it.
All right, my picks here really quick. I'm going north on both of these. On defense, give me Tyreek Stevenson to the Chicago Bears. Love the pick. Tall, lean. I think he's great off the line in terms of, when receivers try to use their hands to separate from corner. I think he's very good at playing through that and keeping up with guys. I think that was an amazing pick for the Chicago Bears. I really did love it. So Rick has a good corner there that he gets to enjoy in his first season as a Bears fan. One day, inevitably, we finished third in the division. And then for my offensive side, again, I'm staying with the North and the Pittsburgh Steelers, man. They had a really good draft. I just mentioned the first two guys, but let me mention Darnell Washington going to them with a 93rd overall pick. If Matt Canada wasn't the offensive coordinator, good God in heaven, I think that the Steelers will actually have a sneaky good offense next season, even more so than what I already do. But sadly, Matt Canada is the offensive coordinator there. But Kenny Pickett, look, you got Najee Harris there for him. You got Deontay Johnson. You got George Pickens. And now you got Darnell Washington. Like, there's some weapons for Kenny Pickett to work with here. And if they only had a better offensive coordinator, good Lord in heaven. Good Lord in heaven. And again, I will say this. Do I like the pick for them, Rick? Absolutely. I just feel bad that Tajay Spears has to deal with Ryan Tannehill for a season. I just do. I just really do.
So can we shift over to asking you about your Matt Canada hatred? Or is that going to be another episode for another day?
It's just simply put, when I feel like regurgitating the food that I've eaten trying to watch you offensive play call, I just think it's terrible. And I think Matt Canada is wasting Kenny Pickett.
Well, fine, I suppose.
I hold it against teams that waste young quarterbacks.
Your guy, by the way, went to the Packers at 179. Carl Brooks went to Green Bay. So there you go.
Team I don't care about anymore now that the quarterback is gone.
There you go.
And the same will be said with the Tennessee Titans here very, very soon. And I will, it's going to be a struggle for me. I'm going to have to try to find a team to replace the Tennessee Titans and Russell Wilson holes in my heart whenever those quarterbacks are eventually done with those teams. But maybe I'll figure it out.
I can help you with that if you want help.
Oh, Lord. All right. Speaking of Rick helping and finishing things off, Rick, finish off the show. Once again, transition, ladies and gentlemen. Rick, this is the first real roaster podium we've had a little bit here. You owe people, Rick.
It is. And as I said 2 weeks ago when I introduced our new fourth cast member who will have a playing part in one of these spots on the podium, this is better, I think, to do live than anything else. So I want to start with my new team. I want to go with the Chicago Bears at number 3 on my rant podium for their pick in the 4th round, which was Rashawn Johnson, the running back from Texas. So this is basically akin to drafting Felix Jones instead of Darren McFadden or drafting Lendale White instead of Reggie Bush. This is like you drafted a guy who, went to the same school as Bijan Robinson, and yet I don't think he's going to really do much. Let's be honest here. I mean, I could be wrong here, but it's a 4th round pick. You want to waste it on a Texas running back? Did you see what happened with Cedric Benson all those years ago? It didn't work out, so why are we doing it again? Come on, bear down. Do it for Ditka. Let's go. That's my number 3. Number 2, I want to talk about this because I brought this up in our group chat recently. it's the springtime, and we're coming up to May and coming up to June. And so what's the one thing that kids are going to be doing during the weekends, when they're off from school? Setting up lemonade stands in front of their house and on their corners. Listen, I'm going to give you one solid piece of advice, kid. If you do not do designer lemonade or pink lemonade or blueberry lemonade, I will come to your stand. I will chop it down. I will drink the lemonade and not pay you a dime. I don't want this country time lemonade nonsense. Don't give me this 4C crap. Give me designer lemonade. Make it make sense and make it something that I can actually want to have instead of driving by your house for your flat tap water, which is on ice that if you're a 4-year-old, you clearly peed in that. Let's be honest here. So, why would I even want to even chance that at all? Like, let's do something else. How about we do something a little different? Maybe, I don't know. Remember the Big Mac Happy Meal things? There was a toy years ago that was like, you could do like Happy Meal toys basically with the Big Macs.
You want toys with your lemonade now?
Yes, I do. I'm a simple man. I want simple things. Give me a koosh ball or a Rubik's Cube with my glass of lemonade for $1. You jackknob. Very simple. And now, number one, remember weeks ago, Jerk, when I said, why are bats? Well, why are crows? Or ravens, for that matter. First of all, nobody knows what you are, a crow or a raven. No one has any idea. We call you both things. Figure out what you are and stick to it. Secondly, the crows almost murdered Billy Shakes the Pirate before he even made a second appearance on the podcast. Because while I was golfing on the 17th hole, one of the crows decided, oh, that pirate hat looks, very nice and tasty. Let me take that and build it for my nest. Get off my Shakespeare, Billy Crows. I don't like this. Why are crows? You are a waste of time. Are you a crow? Are you a raven? You know what you are? A waste of life. Get out of here. Stupid blackbirds, the crows, the ravens, even the starlets are a problem. The starlings are a problem because they're just so loud and shrill. Like, if there's one creature that I think that, my dog would have, no issue with me saying, oh, they're gone forever. It's birds. Because birds, why? Eagles, Seahawks, ravens, why?
You get rid of a lot of sports teams there if you just eliminate all birds.
Bear down. It's all about bears. And, well, you know what the problem too? Birds fly into jets. Birds fly into jet engines. So we have problems with birds. All of us.
Clearly.
We do.
Clearly.
And Trey Young's a bird.
One thing I can confirm is that if you do go to a lemonade stand this summer, Rick, and somehow, some way, those parents watch, I think you're going to get spit in your lemonade this summer out there. So.
I will make my own lemonade, and it will be phenomenal because I will only use the freshest of ingredients.
Are you going to buy yourself a toy?
If you don't like, well, maybe you never know. I do have a nice Hercules sword from when I was 8, actually. So
how has that not showed up on the show yet?
Well, I got it at Christmas, and there's a long-standing family story that goes along with it. I got it when I was 8 years old at Christmas, and I never played with the sword once because my mother deemed it to be too dangerous for an 8-year-old to play with, and so therefore she took it away from me, and I never saw it again. And never opened it out of the box until Christmas this year, when it took 19 years, basically thereabouts, of painstaking reliving the memory over and over and over again because this elephant don't forget. And so I said, it's kind of like that Hercules sword that you got me when I was 8 and never let me play with. And so this year, as a joke, I got it. The Hercules sword. Not the Kevin Sorbo Hercules TV series sword. Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to make the joke that even still at this age, I think your family might think it's still too dangerous for you to play with for your own health, but
Well, you know what? It does come with 2 sounds. So if I did want to, I should take it out of the box. But why take it out of the box? It's a collector's item. It's going to pass down to the generations.
It's been several decades now. I think you could sell that thing for a pretty penny.
Well, I mean, I'll do that, in a few years when my parents aren't, thinking about, oh, we just got him the sword this year. Got to give it some window of time. Yeah. Maybe when I'm 50 and still doing this podcast on Saturdays with the 2 of you.
If we're still doing this podcast for another 2+ decades, that'll be something to say the very least. That'll be a testament to time in and of itself.
Well, the question is, will we still be doing it in our home studios, or will we actually have an actual grandiose theater that we'll be doing it in, where I'll be throwing tomatoes at people for no reason?
If you throw a tomato at either of us, it'll be war in that studio. Speaking of throwing tomatoes, I think people are just about done with the show for this week. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, a podcast that thinks many things, a podcast that thinks the Tennessee Titans matter to most people more than they really do, a podcast that thinks Jack Campbell should have been the first overall pick, apparently, according to some people, and a podcast that ultimately, I'm joking, obviously, and a podcast that ultimately is not necessarily done with the NFL draft. We'll probably mention the draft one more time next week if anything big happens, or if any trades happen, because DeAndre Hopkins, Dalvin Cook, etc. There are still things that can happen this NFL offseason, and who knows when they'll happen. A lot of people were trying to predict that this draft weekend would be the weekend where a lot of trades would happen. Probably a little bit after that, more so. But for all what the NFL offseason will be and all of the fun football and chaos that's going to be around here, this is the place to be. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. And we'll see you guys next week.